have you seated here. This is a day that we've really planned for. We've spent so much time, so much energy. Our research team has done an incredible work. They do it every year, but this year they've taken it, they've taken it higher and much deeper. And I'm so excited to be standing here today to present to you, our State of States report today. Just want to let you know that we're starting very, very soon. We appreciate your patience. Please just bear with us. You'll be seeing me here. You'll be seeing my lovely face. I'll be your host for today, and I hope you like my face. So please just relax. We will start up very, very soon. We're just waiting for 1 or 2 more dignitaries to be seated, and then we will go live. So once again, you're very welcome. We appreciate you. We thank you for your love, for your commitment, to all our partners, to everyone who has contributed to make this happen. We are excited to have you. We appreciate your support, your presence, and I can assure you that you will have a very good time here this morning. And you will love State of States 2020 report. It's a report that you will love. It's a report that has so many insights, so many depth, so many things to say about all our 36 states. You see their financials, you see the epidemic preparedness. You see a lot of things in our report. Very, very important report. So please, stay tuned. I will join you very soon.
financing at the state level. This is one of the flagship programs that Budget, an advocacy group in the country, organizes and brings stakeholders to discuss around how subnationals can continue to drive development in areas of public finance and accountability. We need to speak further on this event briefly before we start. Is Mr. Gabriel Okeowo, CEO of Budget. Nice to have you, and congratulations once again on this launch.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So tell me a bit about today's event, particularly highlighting this period of the pandemic, which has continued to be a major discussion point across the nation. And so, this launch, how is it going to really change the face of public finance and state accountability amidst the pandemic?
All right, thanks. The State of States event is a flagship program of Budget. It's a research we do on a yearly basis, looking into the books of all the 36 states governments in Nigeria. Is first a data-driven research analysis of fiscal economies of the state. But in addition to that, we every year we go a step further to look at key issues or thematic areas where we also research into, right? Why we are not happy about the pandemic, but the pandemic that happened, the COVID-19 pandemic, then gave us the need for us to look at how well states in Nigeria are prioritizing investments in epidemics preparedness, right? The COVID-19 is one epidemic that nobody prepared for, and it came so suddenly. It came in a magnitude that no government would have imagined, right? And it's cumbering economies right away, not only in Nigeria, even across the world. And so this year's State of State, aside from the fiscal analysis of state economies, we have also explored the preparedness of states. How well are they investing in some line items in the budget that tells on water, health, sanitations, those line items in budget that can prevent communicable diseases as it may be. It's COVID-19 we have today. Thankfully, we believe is folding up gradually, but we don't know what other disease or what other epidemics we might be confronting us in the years to come, and that's the essence of adding that to this year's State of State event. Yeah.
And finally, before, because we have to start now, give us a snapshot of what we look at in this report. It has the Governor of Lagos State, Mr. Budgit of States, as special guest, and has the chairman and founder of ProShare, Mr. Olufemi Awemi, as the keynote speaker, and you have a panel session. In this report, what are the 2 or 3 key features that makes it different from other reports that we've had?
Well, I think the major thing or the highlights of this report is the learnings and the capacity that it has, right, for states to see how well they are doing. The report itself is like a self-assessment tool for state government, and is also meant to inspire or what I call healthy competition among states, right? When you see a state that is performing more than you, we expect government of states, advisors to government of states to be able to look into this report, take this report, and find out what are the states that are doing well, right, that they are not doing, and be able to advise their principals.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gabriel. We're looking forward to a very eventful launch of this event, and also we're having a keynote from Mr. Olufemi Awemi, chairman and founder of ProShare. We also have a panel session. So this Budget flagship program, State of the States 2020 launch, is something that everyone should be excited about to watch, because subnationals are very key to the national growth of our economy. Stay tuned as we continue this live stream.
lot into, setting up this program, into the report that we are launching today. A lot of insight has gone into it, and we are excited to share with you what we have discovered, what we have put together, concerning the fiscal situations of the 6 states. I will be your host this morning, and I won't be doing it alone. I have a very special lady who will be co-hosting with me. Is my communications associate, very dependable lady. Please welcome with me Yanu Oluwa Fatoba.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
You're looking good.
Thank you, Damilala.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
So, State of States for us, like I said, is a very, very important event. It is a report that delves into fiscal situation of 36 states. And this year we've taken a look at states' expenditure, we've taken a look at their fiscal capital expenditure budgets, we've looked at how sustainable these states are. We've looked at which of them is even sustainable. Let's say that they don't need to depend on federal allocations. We've looked at what are they doing capital expenditure, how much of their budget is going into capital expenditure, and then how much are they devoting also to health. These are very, very important things that we have looked at, and we will be sharing that with you this morning. Yeah.
We also added a sub-theme this year where we examined state preparedness for health financing. And this basically examines state structures, health structures, and financing put in place by subnational economies to prevent and combat epidemic outbreaks.
So before we start, we would indulge you please to rise to your feet. We want to take the national anthem very briefly. I'm not a chorister, but I will try and and do the job today. It's part of my job. La, 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 la. Don't mind my voice. 3, sing.
Arise, O compatriot, Nigeria's call obey, to serve our father's land, with love and strength and faith. The labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain, to serve with heart and mind, one nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Let's put our hands together for ourselves. There was a sitting senator who couldn't sing that. So please, let's have our seats. You're welcome.
You're welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time. Please, you can follow the live updates via YouTube using the hashtag State of States. So tweet at us, make comments, mention us, tell us what you are learning about State of State 2020. Thank you.
And we also like to acknowledge our online audience. A lot of them have been online since before 10, and we see you. We apologize for just starting, for keeping you waiting.
Thank you so much.
Currently, I know we have over 100 people online logging on to our channel. So we acknowledge you. We are excited to have you. So please just come along with us.
So very quickly, would like to welcome some of our guests. Thank you for joining us. We'll be mentioning some of our guests that are present here right now. And first on my list is Mr. Femi Taiwo, the Executive Director at LEAP Africa. Please, can you signify? Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Femi. Thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Secondly, I'd like to welcome Mr. Kola Oluwadare. That's the Deputy Director at SERAP. Mr. Kola, you're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Please, a round of applause for our guest. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have the Commissioner of Budget and Planning of Lagos State seated. The person, Mr. Samuel Egube. Apologies if I didn't call you correctly, sir.
Welcome,
You're very
sir.
welcome.
You're very welcome.
And we also have the Chief Economist of ProShare Limited, Mr. Teslim Shitabe. You're very welcome.
Welcome, Mr. Teslim. We appreciate your presence. Thank you.
So without further ado, Budgit, the person who puts all this together, I called him around 2 a.m. last night, and he picked my call at the first ring. He's always on ground, always giving direction, giving instructions, and ensuring that everything works smoothly. Please welcome with me Gabriel Okewu, the Principal CEO of Budgit, for his welcome address.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome, sir.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for making it to this meeting this morning. We really appreciate every one of you for taking out time, especially on a day like this in Lagos, where it had rained heavily this morning, and yet we still were able to make it to this meeting this morning. Commissioner for Budget and Economic Planning, Mr. Sam Igube, Lagos State. The Honorable Commissioner for Budget and Planning, Enugu State, Mr. David Ugwanta. I believe is joining us virtually. I hope at some point we'll be able to see those that are joining us virtually so that we can also feel their presence in the hall. Our keynote speaker, Mr. Olufemi Awuyemi, founder and chairman of ProShare Nigeria Limited, the chief economist of ProShare Nigeria Limited, Mr. Teslim Shitabe. Our distinguished panelists are those that are here seated in the hall and those that are already connected with us virtually. Captains of industries, leaders of civil society organizations. We recognize every one of you and we greet you this morning. Our partners and friends, supporters of our work from inception till now, especially the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who has been the key supporters of the State of States events and State of State research on a yearly basis since 2015. The director and co-founder of Budgit, Mr. Joseph Agumbiade. Gentlemen and ladies of the press, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to welcome every one of us to this year 2020 State of State report. The State of State report is a data-driven research that looks at state fiscal sustainability as determined by their ability to meet recurrent expenditures obligations, manage their debts sustainably, and the extent to which today's revenue can serve outstanding debts is also factored. The State of State research started in 2015, and every year since inception, the presentation has always been in Abuja since 2015, and this is the first time we are going to be having the State of States presentation in Lagos. Please, let's put our hands together. And I really hope that maybe in years to come, we can also take this to other states in Nigeria. And it is our special honor to have the #1 citizens of Lagos himself, not just here represented, but here in person. And I believe in a short, deep research. We are very excited about this year's report because we took a step further to validate our methodology with other key stakeholders that also beam their light on subnational economies. While the COVID-19 pandemic ravaged the world, in putting adequate resources in place to prepare for epidemics or pandemic, as the case may be. It is my belief that our piece of work that we will be unveiling in a short while in the course of this event, the piece of work for the 2020 State of States, will provide actionable intelligence that serves state governments, citizens, civil society organizations, researchers, and the general citizens as a whole. For government, it is our hope that they will take this report as an assessment report of their improvement or decline in fiscal sustainability and its components, putting into consideration their capacity to generate revenue, their debt stock, and other components of state economies. And we hope that this work will also inspire healthy competition among states, and more importantly, that this work that we are launching today and presenting to you today will serve as a learning material sheet where each state can pick and look at what state is outperforming them and pick lessons from what those states are doing, and they also do same. And together, we all have a better society, a better state, and a better Nigeria.
To this end, today, I want to enjoin every one of us to please sit back and be part of this event wholeheartedly. Because of the reality of the current situation, we are having a mix or what we call hybrid events, and this is the first time too. Usually it would have just been all full physical events, but because of realities of COVID-19, right, we have decided to have an hybrid event. Naturally, would have taken about 150 persons, but we have carefully restrict the room to 50 persons so that we can have adequate social distancing and observe all the state's COVID-19 protocols. I believe our keynote speaker, the report presenter, and our panelists will do justice in stirring us up to be more inquisitive about subnational fiscal analysis. I want to thank every one of us one more time for making it to this meeting today, and I hope that at the end of today, you will leave here feeling satisfied and feeling that you have spent your day or the time you will spend here very productively. I thank you all, and God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gabriel Okewu. That's the principality of budget. Please, a round of applause for him again. Very much for all that you do. While Gabriel was giving his welcome address, one of our panelists walked in. She is the well-renowned Mrs. Toyosi Akerele Ogunji. I hope I got it right. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. She's a panelist. Please, a round of applause for her. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been, one of Budget's main supporter regarding State of States reports. They've been there for us, provided us with the support, and it is because of them that we are here today and supporting this program since inception. And we hope that they will continue to give us, their full support so that all states, Nigerian states, all states can benefit from this very insightful report. We have someone from Melinda Gates Foundation this month that will be giving us a goodwill message. She will be acting online. I believe she's on standby right now. Technical crew, are we ready? Can you signal to me if you're ready, please? So just give us 30 seconds. I'm sure we're trying to set that up.
Good morning, everyone, and please allow me to stand on the existing protocols. My name is Chisom Okechukwu, and I work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I'm pleased to be here today, although, unfortunately, I cannot join you physically because I'm here in Washington, D.C. at the moment. But regardless, I'm pleased to be here, even though virtually. For too long as a country, we have focused on assessing development measures and progress, but performance has been to our detriment as a country. I say this because a lot of the progress and measures and effort providing very critical services, such as primary health care and secondary and primary education, to name a few. These are important, and therefore it is important that we are judicious as a country in tracking this progress at the state level. And I think that this is one of the reasons why the budget report, State of States report, today being launched is very, very important. Because of this importance, this is why Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has sponsored budget in the production of this report since its inception in 2015. And I think that, this report is useful to us, both as citizens, those of us who are citizens or members of civil society, as well as policymakers. For citizens, it provides information that enables you to hold your government accountable. And when you look at fiscal data in Anambra State or performance on primary healthcare in Anambra State, it's difficult to know if your government is doing well or not so well. But when you have this cross-cutting data that the State of States report by Budgit provides, you're able to say to your governor or to your state commissioner for health, why is it that our primary healthcare services are not on par with the services that are provided in nearby Enugu State, for example? And this is one of the reasons why I think that we as citizens need to continue to engage and read this State of States report. And so I'm pleased to see the level of participation in this launch, even though we are not all able to be here physically. I think this report is also very important for policymakers, because in reality, as a policymaker, it's really hard to judge and assess yourself when there's no benchmarking available. For example, how do you know that your state IGR is sufficient? How do you know that you are operating your state IGR at the most efficient frontiers? Well, I think this report helps to provide policymakers with this very critical context, because it helps you, for example, as Lagos State, say, here's how much IGR we're raising. Here's our debt to IGR ratio. How does that compare with nearby Ogun State, for example? I think this report is therefore incredibly critical, and that's why the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been very pleased to support and to fund this effort. I enjoy Budget. I am pleased with the progress and you've made with the report since 2015. You've expanded the areas and issues that this report works on. I'm pleased to see that there is focus on what is perhaps Nigeria's most critical challenge right now, which is this COVID pandemic. And so I'm pleased with that focus. I enjoy Budgit as you progress in what happens at the local government level is also super critical to many citizens. With that, I'll say thank you and hand over.
Round of applause for Chisom Okechukwu, please. That's Ms. Chisom Okechukwu from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation giving us a goodwill message from the organization. I'm going to bring up again Gabriel Okewu, Principality of Budget, because the Executive Governor of Lagos State is on standby. It's not ready yet. Oh, okay. So we're just sort of waiting for him. He's been on standby, so I'm sure they're making preparations for him to join us. So we will just go ahead with the program. Sorry, a minute, please.
All right, thank you very much. And I really hope that the technicians can help us to see those that are connected live, especially now that we want to take a very special address. So it is a very great honor for us, Budget as an organization, and for the efforts that has gone into the State of States event, and particularly the presence of the man. Earlier on, Damlola introduced me as the chief host, but I think the person that really deserves to be called the chief host of this gathering, being the first time that we are having this in Lagos and we are having it in his domain, it wouldn't be me, it will be the man that I want to bring up very soon. He has gone out of his way to show his commitment to embrace transparency and accountability in governance, and out of his extremely busy schedules, right, he has honored his word by not just sending representation here. He could have as well done that and we'll still be happy. Please rise. Let's rise as we honor and regard the person and the office he upholds. Join me to welcome His Excellency, the Executive Governor of Lagos State, Mr. Babajide Olushola Sanwo-Olu, for his goodwill message. The Governor, sir.
Hear me. Good morning, all. I'm sure you can hear me very well.
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. First, let me apologize for coming or joining you late. If I tell you how my movement has been in the last 12 hours or so, then you will know the kind of things you wish for, even wanting to be the governor. I slept in Abuja, right? And coming to Lagos, I got stuck, right? So I needed to improvise somewhere so that I can have this address being passed on to you, right? But I'm indeed excited, and I'm hoping that even if I don't do my A team, I'm sure that Budgit will not query me at the end of this presentation, and I will still get, maybe a B plus, because typically it's not even in my office and it's not at home, but I had to improvise, because we got stuck in between. But because I've given a commitment that I would join you, I needed to keep that commitment, So, but I listened to some of the things Stephen said, but I missed the opening remarks from Gabriel. And I'm hoping that part of the points that you've mentioned, you'll be able to pass them on, to me later. So if you can hear me, I will probably just say I won't stand on existing protocols, very typical of us in Nigeria. I don't know who and who are in attendance, but I say to you, it's a pleasure for me to address you at this event of the launch of the state report by Budgit. I'm aware that this is the first time this event is taking place in Lagos. Incidentally, like I said, I was just coming from Abuja overnight. Therefore, I especially want to welcome all of you for attending this presentation ceremony. This effort, the publication of the annual State of the State report, which started in 2015, it's very, very commendable. It was the management thinker, Peter Drucker, who famously said that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. Budget over, and as well as testing useful and actionable trends and patterns. You have done commendable pioneering work as it regards in this regard, and you stand out for the readable and easy to digest style of presentation that your work has shown over the years. In this year's report, you released some interesting data about Lagos State. For example, in 2019, like you said, only about 23% of our 2019 revenue came for our FAC allocation, which puts us in a class, by ourselves amongst, which certainly puts us far ahead of our peers, if only 23% from Abuja. We're now at the end of the third quarter in 2020, which means that we can make some comparison with with the same period in 2019. As at August 2020, the percentage of our FAC in our total revenue and our ability to ensure that we continue to maintain an independent approach to the FAC contribution as a component of our revenue than the percentage we had in the whole of 2019, right? So in the first quarter of 2020, in fact, our actual revenue outperformed the budget by about 6%. That's in the first quarter. And I'm sure you know that in the first quarter, we've not felt the full brunt of the pandemic, COVID-19, between January and March then. But in May, we're compelled to review our 2020 budget downward by about 21%, which, is in line with the economic reality that we found at 920 billion. So the Lagos State Assembly finally approved this revision in our budget in August. And so what we see in that budget, we're seeing a 10% reduction in our recurrent and a 24% reduction in our capital budget, respectively. As at August 2020, our total recurrent expenditure had performed at about 83%, far more than even what was comparable last year. We've done about 83% as at August this year, while our capital expenditure based on the new revised budget stands at about 70% go through. The State of the State report also shows that our 2019 debt stock saw an almost 10% reduction. The debt stock dropped from 965 billion in 2018 to about 871 billion in 2019. We have continued to maintain our sustainability ratio of debt service to revenue at about 22%, as well as within the best, which we believe is within the best class of about 30% threshold. So we are even far below, that debt portfolio that we inherited, as a fiscally responsible state, by ensuring that longer tenure loans, are what we negotiated and with lower interest rate. So we've actually cleaned up, a significant part of our debt stock. We had some single digit, some very early, 11, 12 kind of numbers as completely something that we are borrowing. We want to also reduce, our currency risk, and stay within, a currency that we can manage and we can control. So we're sort of like also repricing our financing to stay in the Naira bucket as against just rushing, to get, a foreign currency exposure where we're not in control as into the exchange rate or the interest rate that also might come out for me. So, but in terms of our proportion of our recurrent to capital expenditure, we're able to achieve a 51 to 49 proportion as at August 2020. This, I must confess, is far below, our 55-45 that I would typically want, So what that shows is, our capital, which usually is more than our recurring, is standing at about 51-49. In some other parts of the country, even at national, they are doing about, 30 to 70, meaning it's about 30% capital, about 70% recurring. But for us, the strategy is to come and bring it down back to about 55-45 or even do 60-40, where our emphasis will be more on capital expenditure. But you'll agree with me that the recurring had to go up, this current year because of our medical spending on the overhead expenditure. We needed to pay more, for medical personnel allowances, all of the risks that we've all gone through, consumables, and during this period of pandemic, so we couldn't, be extremely very prudent in terms of just ensuring that it's only capex. We needed to do some overhead expenditure so that we can show some relevance in that place. But we will continue to ensure that the increase in the fiscal deficit, the devaluation of Naira, the inflation we are seeing also does not distort, our numbers too much. We are, however, hopeful that by the end of October this year, there will have been an improved and a greater cost efficiency in our operations as a government and in the public service. So we're still giving you that commitment that we will push, even in the last 3 months, end of the year, we will push and continue to see an effective and efficient cost reduction on the overhead side, while keeping, what will show our excellence in governance, which is capital expenditure. The observation that Lagos had the highest subnational health spend in 2019 reflects our status as the most popular state in the country. We recognize that there is room for even more investment, because we need to raise our capital on our healthcare, given our population. Chisholm said something around where we need to begin to measure how much, even all of these spends, how much can we see it with the numbers of improvement we have in our health facilities. This, in our view, for 2020, because we believe that our human capital index, funding for our human capital index is critical for us to be able to develop, the future and the future of our state and the future of our population being, a predominantly young population. So the human capital index is something that is paramount for us, and we need to begin to put money, there. As I businesses without being them exposed to the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's important for us that as we open, we're not unaware that we needed to do that in a safe and in a secure, environment. And I'm sure, as you know, we find balances that we need to balance. Whilst the pandemic was going on, we needed to listen to the science, which is the health. We needed to consider the economic, issues, because a lot of our citizens are daily wage earners. We also needed to deal with security issues, because you saw what happened even when we're trying to, give out palliatives, how the population surged, and where we needed to balance all of that. We're also unmindful, when people came out and said that, well, if you are keeping us at home, you need to provide food for us, in Agege, in all these other places. So all of these three pillars, we needed to balance them very well during this pandemic. But what are we doing differently going forward now? We've said that we needed to do 3 critical R's. And so what are those R's? How well do we maintain a strong pandemic response? That is critical for us. How do we restart the Lagos economy? That's the second R. And how do we reimagine the way Lagos State operates going forward? So for us, we need to maintain those R's: our response, our restart, and our reimagining, because these are 3 components that will shape how we deal with the pandemic going forward. Whilst we're in the pandemic, we're dealing with 3 C's, which was communication, collaboration, and coordination. Now that we're seeing some small line down the tunnel, we're not out of it yet. We're thinking of a restart using 3 R's, to our response coming out of the pandemic, how to restart our economy, and how to reimagine that Lagos will operate going forward. We deeply appreciate the generous contribution of our various donors, starting from with the federal government, and all of the various organizations that have supported us. I'm sure our Budget will be happy that on 3 occasions, we've had to transparently also communicate and acknowledge all of the various donors, be it financial, be it material, that were published within all the newspapers that we have running. And we've done that 3 times, in the last 6 months. And I can say to you that the accounts, for all the spends, on during this period are being audited, they're being accounted for, and we have a space where, anybody that wants to utilize the funds that have been given to us. I'm sure you also know that into health, the numbers shows that out of their 111 billion budget, about 33 billion is being earmarked. We'll begin to see an increase in our year-on-year allocation for the health space for the next 3 years or so. So although our fiscal approach to the future pandemics continue to evolve, we are shoring up our economy through expanded investment in other critical areas. We believe that is also important for us. Some strong food security. So we need to, we cannot continue to give reasons that we're a small state and we cannot play in the agricultural space. So we need to look at food security as part of our critical investment going forward. We need to look at commerce and industry, small and medium scale businesses. How can we ensure that they continue to live and they continue to survive, going forward? Information technology is so critical for us going forward, and I will talk about that, in a couple of minutes. Art and tourism, Lagos continue to remain, that space, that we can use, as a platform to energize and to leapfrog the country on the art and tourism space. Transportation is important for us, and we also need to strengthen, our infrastructure by about 29% in 2021. That's how we believe that our full recovery on the COVID-19 will happen on all of these sectors that I've just mentioned. But even before the pandemic, we had attracted some investment that I wanted to also think that to share with you. In January last year and January this year, we saw an investment of over 600 million on the Lekki deep sea ports, which was a direct, equity investment, coming straight into Lagos. That is something that we're truly, really very excited about. But we're also on course, and whilst even during this COVID, we're on course to deploy our initiatives around information. I'm sure around Lagos, all of you will have seen the various colors of fiber ducts that we're doing, yellow, blue, green, everywhere. So we're doing a first 3,000 kilometer, which is phase one. After they complete that 3,000, we hope to do another 3,000. So meaning that the entire space of Lagos will want to have fiber connectivity, which will have about 6,000 fiber connectivity. All the ducts will have been there, and the fibers will be there. So all the telcos need not go back and have to begin to dig to lay their cables or something. So this is the new normal for all of us. We're talking virtually now. So information technology, internet capability, for us, it's a must-do for us in Lagos, and we've started, and we're on the right trajectory for that. We're also doing what we call our smart city project, safe city project. So we will be deploying over 2,000 CCTV cameras, in different parts of the state, that and be able to manage, the space, the physical infrastructure space in the state very well. While the fiber ones are also going on, we're hoping that we will drop fiber connectivity in all of our public spaces, in our schools, in our hospitals, in all our public buildings. So each and every one of them will have fiber connectivity and capability, by the time, this project is coming to an end. It will also be nice for me to mention around food security that by the end of the year, latest January, February next year, we'll be opening the biggest rice mill in the country. As we speak, it's the biggest rice mill in the country at Imota, which will be producing about 2.4 million bags of 50 kg rice annually. 2.4 million 50 kg bags of rice annually. The interesting thing there for that is that we believe that mill will directly and indirectly, in the entire rice value chain, create about 250,000 jobs. The job creation for us is the major stake that we also see there, beyond the interventions that we're doing. So it's one of the interventions and we see. The excellent way of tracking unemployment and eradicating poverty, is part of the things that we need to do. So we need to wrap up our efforts at ensuring that our revenue generation is not only innovative, but is sustainable. We have gone to a great height to explain this part of our initiatives is for us to be able to justify excuse for poor governance or poor preparedness for the pandemic. We do not want to give excuses. We want to say that the pandemic has come, it's been global, but it's not a reason. Like I told my cabinet members on Monday and Tuesday coming out of the retreat, that the citizens will not listen to excuse around the pandemic for us. We have promised them delivery and the dividends of democracy, and that we must ensure that we deliver. And so the major lessons for us during this coronavirus pandemic is that uncontained pandemic are potential, uncontained epidemics are potential pandemics. And what do I mean? We need to very, very quickly have structures where we can control and prevent some of these things when they are epidemics, control them aggressively before they turn, into a pandemic. Because once they get into that space, of becoming a global pandemic, then it becomes a lot more expensive, and it affects, all the tiers of government, and so it makes governance very difficult. So all of us in government needs at all levels, we need to institutionalize and see models where we need to reduce infectious disease prevention, everything that stands in that space, going forward. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy that there is a recognition of the work we put into containing the coronavirus pandemic in Lagos State. As you know that we continue to remain the epicenter of the disease in Nigeria, we have also begun to see an appreciable resumption of our economic activity. But right from the beginning, we appreciated the huge responsibility that was on our shoulders. Well, they call me the incident commander. It's because, I've also been blessed with a team that had worked with me over the last 7 months. We had a very vibrant war cabinet to come up with our A team. These are all professionals and experts that have joined me in government. And throughout all of this period, we've come up with a strategy where we can quickly test, we can quickly trace, and we can quickly treat people that have shown symptoms of the virus. and that was one of the models that has helped Lagos remain safe and secure, throughout this period. And I must also share, these statistics with you that even with the over 100,000 test cases, that we conducted, with close to 20,000 positivity that we recorded in the past 7 months, we had less than 2% fatality. If anything, that is the most daring news that I'm always happy to share. We had less than 2%. In fact, it was about 1.3, 1.4% that was fatality for us. So what it meant for us is that we've been able to keep our citizens, alive and make that at the end of all of this virus, we didn't have so much fatality, and people haven't lost, their loved ones, to this needless virus that we all did plan very well for. Full goal remain, to contain the pandemic and to have mitigating economic, disruption. For all the positive indices that this report has identified, let me specifically thank, like I said, my team, the Deputy Governor, my cabinet members, public servants, for all their patience, and everybody coming out, to respond very quickly, at various times. As I conclude, we had an economic agenda which we call Project THEMES, THEMES, and I'm sure all of you, are fully aware and understand what each of those acronyms stands for. So for us, it's an economic agenda that is aimed to create a greater Lagos for each and every of our citizens, a Lagos where no one is left behind, where people see a connection between the taxes they pay and the quality of the public service they enjoy, and a Lagos that is able to make the most judicious use of the resources that you've given to us. And we're also aware that the most efficient approach to a pandemic preparedness is committing human and financial resource to preventive measures. We need to indeed be able to do it. Let's ensure that whatever we need to do, to prevent some of these things before they occur, let's do it. Because they say that it's only the effect of losing the prevention makes it a whole lot difficult and expensive, when you are now needing to deal with the curative part of it. But we will continue to strive to do our best to protect our citizens, to protect life of every Lagosian. So the State of the State report also makes it clear that there are improvements, on our part, and we welcome all the insights and all the recommendations that will be coming out from the reports. We'll take all the criticism, if any, because for us, we believe that it will just make us plan better and perform better, in the years ahead. Let me once again commend and thank, the entire management of Budgit for this very insightful work you guys are doing. I must comment that the last time I met with some of your team, I saw the energy in the room. I saw the vibrancy that each and every one of you is made up, and I want to commend you. I want to say to you to continue to stay, to this event. Thank you very much for listening, and I yield the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Governor. We really, really appreciate you. Thank you for the efforts that you invested in making this possible for you to be able to speak to us live at the State of States event. We really appreciate you. We do not take this for granted. And it's still going to be an insight. I believe that the report we are presenting is an objective analysis, and where a state has done well, we'll say so. Where a state needs to check, we'll also say so. And I'm also happy in particular that you mentioned that the state is going to prioritize domestic borrowings over foreign. And that is because particularly that is one thing that we saw, and we know now that with the exchange rate devaluation, it means that for every foreign loan that we get now, we are going to be paying more for them. And we truly, 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 truly appreciate you, sir. Thank you very much for making it to this meeting. Please, every one of us in the room, can you please put your hands together one more time and let me appreciate the Executive Governor of Lagos State. Thank you very much. I will hand over now to the host of this event to take us further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so very quickly, before I call our keynote speaker, I'd like to welcome Mr. Dabisaki Mark Ikemejima from Ford Foundation. You're welcome, sir. Please, can we welcome him with a round of applause? Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to welcome, for our keynote address this morning, I'd like to welcome Mr. Teslim Shitabe from ProShare Nigeria. He's the chief economist and is representing Mr. Olufemi Awoyemi. Please, a round of applause for Mr. Teslim as he gives the keynote address. You're welcome, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I also like to say that it's a pleasure for me to be here today, representing Mr. Olufemi Awoyemi of ProShare. I also want to seize the opportunity of standing on all protocols that every other person has stood on. I don't know where the protocol is, but just assume I'm standing on it. So I'm standing on all protocols, and I want to really apologize for the absence of Mr. Olufemi Awoyemi. I'm one of those who are a bit disappointed that he's not here, because for those who know him, he's a firebrand, right? And he would have given us exceptionally fresh perspectives to some of the issues that we will discuss today. However, Mr. Awoyemi is not here, but Mr. Shitabe is. Somehow I'll struggle to try to justify Mr. Awoyemi's confidence in me in saying that I should represent him. Right. I also want to say that I listened to Chisom, and I've listened to the Executive Governor of Lagos State, and after listening to what they have said, I was very tempted to say that, what else am I going to say? I mean, this gentleman, this lady and gentleman has said it all. I might as well just say, thank you for inviting me, I'm going. But I won't do that. I will decide to go ahead with Mr. Olufemi Awoyemi's presentation. Now, in doing this, I'm not necessarily going to read it, but I will highlight some of the key points that exist in the presentation. Right. Now, while we've been talking about the state of the states, one of the key issues we've talked about are debt. Another issue we've talked about are things like proportion of the state's IGR to its total revenue, proportion of FAC to total revenue. These are very, very important indices. And I want to quickly start off by saying that I think Budgit has done a tremendous job in breaking these things down for analysts in particular. What I think Budgit has done is what I would like to call intellectual art. A brilliant work of intellectual audacity, to have the confidence and the faith to be able to look numbers in the face and express reality through numbers. And I'm happy that His Excellency said that it's written in such a manner that it's quite digestible. And I urge all of us to actually go ahead and read that report. It's a brilliant piece of work. Right, after saying that, and that wasn't an advert, after saying that, one of the persons who spoke earlier talked about measurement. For us at ProShare, measurement is very critical, because if you can't measure a thing, we don't believe you can manage it. So one of the things that and it gives us an opportunity to decide whether we are being governed in the appropriate manner. And I like someone said, yeah, it's not criticism. It really isn't criticism. It's just the fact that we need to test our systems. We need to understand whether what we are being presented is adequate for the citizenry. In the last couple of years, we've always been complaining about the federal fiscal challenges. But like Chisom rightly pointed out, it's not just about the federal government. That area of government that touches you and I most is actually the states and local governments. And so one of the things I want to quickly urge is that in the next report, maybe Budgit in 2021 will give us some insights into the state of the LGAs, because that is the level of government that really touches the heart of the average individual that runs the streets of Lagos, Enugu, Kanu, wherever it is, local governments are important, right? So now to the report, to Mr. Oyemi's statement. One of the key things that we say in ProShare is that in God we trust. Every other thing is data. We need to trust God, definitely. But we also need to understand the data. We need to see what the data says, and we speak to the data. And based on the data, we need to articulate positions and policies that will make all our lives better. Now, one of the things that Budget Report 2020 noted, and that we took into consideration, was the fact that the debts of the state in 2019 rose by 162.87%, or by 3.3 trillion naira. Now, with state budget debts rising that high, one of the key questions for us is, so what? Is an increase in state government debt a bad or a good thing? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Having debt isn't really a death sentence, but debt must be used creatively and objectively, right? So we've said, let's look at the states that has had a challenge has been His Excellency State, Lagos State, in respect of foreign debts, which has been over $1 billion. And for us, we were quite concerned, just as I think Budget's report suggests, that in an environment where there's a great amount of uncertainty in the foreign exchange market, a debt that high could be quite dangerous for the health of the state's finances. It doesn't mean that the state is bankrupt, and I've heard some people make some remarks along that line, but that's not true. Lagos State's economy is robust and it's quite healthy. However, there are challenges when you have a situation where you have a COVID-19 environment in which we expect that supply chains will be difficult, foreign exchange will also be difficult to access, and therefore there will be a reduction in the exchange rate of the naira relative to the dollar or any other foreign currency. As a matter of fact, even if it's the yen, we are not doing too well across. Needs to address. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. The truth of the matter is it depends on which state you're looking at. We looked through your report and we found out that there were differential impacts of debt on the fiscal stability of each of the states. So some states took on debt and were able to turn those debts into creating value, which has enabled them grow their state GDP. However, state GDP is gross domestic product, and that means basically how much goods and services are produced in the state per annum. Now, some states have been able to use their debt, grow their infrastructure, and move their state GDP forward. But there are quite many states in this country that have borrowed and have found it very difficult to utilize that money properly. And one of the reasons why is that when you're borrowing, one of the things you want to do is to borrow roads, other infrastructures. What some states have done is to borrow money to pay salaries. And that, we did a particular study on one of the states in the Southwest, and we noticed that that was a massive challenge to the state. The state has a population of 2.5 million people, although it's going to about 2.7 now. We found out that about 2.3 million were civil servants. And if you look at take it from the perspective that you have about over 80% of your population in the civil service, and you're not producing a certain amount of private revenues that allow you to improve your VAT, that's value-added tax, how do you sustain such a state? Where does the money come from? And that is one of the major things that I think budget needs to take up going forward, deeper dive of those states. It was a brilliant job looking at the debt relative to the total revenues and all that, but how do those revenues key into the fiscal stability of the state? Although there's a fiscal stability index, which I know you've done. And we looked at that also. Okay, right. So debt is a challenge, but it is not a death sentence. So yes, states have increased their debt by over 100% between 2018 and 2019. However, some of the states have done quite well with those debt figures. His Excellency, the Governor of Lagos State, has shown us how well Lagos State has tried to manage its debt situation, and we're pleased with that. And we're also pleased with the fact that he has announced that they're taking a second look at the size of the foreign debt. Here I actually had a few slides. Unfortunately, I'm not too sure that, are they available? Right, fine. So maybe we could put up my slides. Okay, right, yeah. So this gives you an idea of the debt profile of the various states. You can see that you have states like Lagos. This is the domestic debt profile. So you see you have a state like Lagos up there with about 493 billion naira in domestic debt, followed by a state like Rivers. Then you have Akwa Ibom. These figures suggest that certain states are not really heavily indebted in nominal terms, if you look at the size, but relative to how much they are producing in their states, they're quite serious. One of the states I mentioned is here. Its debt is somewhere in the middle of the table, so I'm not going to tell you the state. So if you're waiting for me to tell you the state, it's somewhere in the middle of the table. We have a detailed report, actually, on that state, which we'll make available to Budgit. And its situation is very interesting, very, very interesting, right? And we think that with debt structures of this nature, states in an environment of COVID-19 are going to have to do three things. First, rethink the state. The governor had his own 3 R's. We have ours. So our own is rethink the state. You've got to rethink the whole economy of that state, right? And other states too. Once you have rethought it, the governor grabbed one of our ideas. One of his R is our own R. So Your Excellency, you are paying us for that. So his R of reimagining, that is very critical. We have to imagine the future. Because the issues are not about what has happened in the past. It's not really about even what is happening now. It's about how do we address the future. So we have to reimagine that future. We have to determine what kind of future do we all want to live in collectively. And from His Excellency, your state. But they are getting, what is the last R? The last R is actually to re-strategize. We need to re-strategize. We need to, once we have thought about the kind of state we want, we need to determine how we're going to get there. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? Those are critical issues that we're going to have to address after reading Budgit's 2020 report. Can somebody just flip the external debt? Yeah, somewhere. No, that's IGR. It should be somewhere close to the domestic debt of the states. Yeah, that's state's external debt. So, no, you just skipped it. Right. So, this is the external debt of the various states in the country. Our dear state, Lagos, you can see how high that external debt is, right? It's quite high. Then you find another state like Kaduna State following up. Then you have Edo State after that. Then you have Cross River. Then you have Bauchi State. Do we think that there are any particular reasons for concern for a state outside Lagos? For a Kaduna State at having about $570 billion in debt, and then $1 million in debt, $1 million, and then you have Edo 245, then you have Cross River 172. Now, these states are quite different in their economic structure. And I don't want to go into the detail of the economic structures of those states. Budget has done a great deal of job in regards to that. So anybody who wants to look at their structure can go and read the Budget 2020 report, right? But we can't say here that some of those states have dire cause for concern. And I'll point out, short of somebody knocking me on the head, I'll kind of point out, if we look at Kaduna State, right? Kaduna State is just slightly under half the external debt of Lagos State. But in terms of state GDP, its ability to generate revenue is nowhere near Lagos State. It's nowhere near Lagos State at all. And therefore, you start wondering how the state is going to generate a stream of cash flows to meet its debt servicing obligation in a period of COVID. What does COVID do? What really is the challenge of COVID? Yes, it's a health problem. Yes, international oil prices are going down. But what is the key problem with COVID? Economic activities internally become challenged. you cannot generate the kind of incomes you need to meet certain requirements. So, how would a state like Kaduna State be able to generate enough revenues to meet its external debt obligations? I'm not going to prefer the answer, but we do have it. But I'm not preferring it here. But I'm saying that these are things that Budgit is bringing to the fore through their 2020 report and making it obvious that we need to cross our T's and dot certain I's if we're going to have sustainable states going forward, right? Okay, thank you very much for that. So let me go to another issue that I wanted to address in terms of the report. Now, the report notes that there are 5 states that topped the Fiscal Sustainability Index. Now, of those 5 states, you had Rivers State, Anambra State, Ogun State, Lagos State, and Kano State. My question is, what do all these states have in common? I'll mention the states again. Rivers State, Anambra State, His Excellency is not here. I think you might be here digitally. And then Ogun State, Lagos State, and Kano State. There are things that these states have in common. And so you won't be too surprised that they are sustainable. The things that they have in common, the answer, I'm giving you expo, is that they are economic hubs. What I mean by economic hubs is that there are states that have peculiar economic activities that generate a large amount of cash flow that enable them meet their obligations. And let's look at, for instance, what would we say Lagos State is most particularly known for in terms of economic activities? I heard a friend of mine a day or two ago saying that manufacturing. That's not true. Lagos is basically a commercial hub for commerce and services. That's what we excel in. And when I say we, I'm a Lagosian. I'm making it clear that I'm talking about it because I'm also a Lagosian. So, but what we do is services. And so you see all the banks, you see all the other ICT companies, and everybody's in Lagos, right? So it's a hub for services. And then you now take a state like Rivers, oil and gas, obviously. Then you take a state like, that's a good one, Ogun State. Somebody told me that it was agriculture. No, it's not agriculture. Does anybody really have an answer to that? Ogun State is actually manufacturing, industry. Ogun State, there's Lekki, but Lekki is not really an industrial hub. So in Ogun State, there's a need for collaboration and cooperation amongst states in Nigeria. And that's what we see lacking. It's not been broached in the report, but it's also something we think we would want you to look at. You know, the opportunities that exist for collaboration and cooperation. We call it twinning. Can states twin? For instance, His Excellency had talked about rice. Lagos really doesn't have the land, okay? But one brilliant thing he has done is to provide the technology for other people to grow the rice and we will mill it. Do you understand the thing? Other people do the rice production. We don't have land. But we have some money and we can provide technology. So we can twin, partner with you. I'm sure we all know lake rice. I don't know how well it is done. The Honorable Commissioner is here. He will perhaps give us insight into that. But that was a brilliant approach to what we think is the model for thinking outside the box and moving forward. It's a problem actually referring to them as a state. But are they basket cases? Perhaps not. But for them to be able to regenerate themselves, they're going to need to go into collaborations and cooperations with other states. And that's one of the things that we have advocated based on your report, that we saw that there are opportunities for collaboration and cooperation, okay? Then we looked at Budgit's report again for 2020, and we looked at the challenges that is faced during the time of COVID and the challenges that relate to oil prices. The governor of Lagos State has brilliantly told us how Lagos has responded to the challenge of COVID. And it's been brilliant, quite honestly. We won't say we came, Nigeria as a country didn't move too early. We didn't, before we started really working on it, it was about March. and this problem had been there from December 2019. We didn't come into our consciousness until maybe January. Then we started working on solutions or at least containment strategies in March, right? But since the government of Lagos State has become conscious of the need to address the issue, even though we are the epicenter of COVID in the country, our response has been brilliant. It's been, and I think Lagos State deserves a round of applause for that. Please, gentlemen, you should give Lagos State a round of applause. Because truly and truly, you know, we also had Ebola, and we had to come in early and attach our framework to sort out the Ebola problem. So we seem to have gotten it right in terms of rapid response. But I'm not too sure, and maybe the commissioner will let us know whether Lagos has a disaster recovery plan. Yes, it's good for us to have frameworks that deal with emergencies, but are you planning for the black swan? And beyond black swan, are you planning for the great? It doesn't even, there's like the Ebola, like COVID-19, it was a black swan. It was a shot that came, and nobody could have planned for it. But there are also challenges that we know. We don't know when they will happen, but we know they will happen. And let me give you a particular example, flooding. The flooding challenges in Lagos. We know they will happen, but when they happen, so they are gray swans. Do we have frameworks for addressing those challenges? That is critical, not only in Lagos, but across the Federation. States need to have disaster recovery plans. For instance, one of the challenges we are going to face is food security. We may talk very grandly about the various schemes and plans we have, but food security is going to be a major issue for Nigeria. Why? For instance, most of us eat rice, and I'm sure all of us know that about 20% of the metric tons of rice that is produced annually has been wiped out by floods. So the cost of rice will go up. This is end of the year. We call it the Imba months. The Imba months are typically known for an increase in the demand for that particular grain, right? Because some of us, well, I'm not too sure whether we still do it, but we give it out as presents during Christmas and all that. And it's part of our Christmas tradition of eating rice. So there's going to be increased pressure to stabilize rice prices. So my concern basically is not just about rice. That's just an example. It's a placeholder for what strategies do we have in place in the various states for various challenges that could occur or could not occur. Because we've got to prepare for the next black swan, like His Excellency said. We've got to also prepare for the gray swan. Okay? And looking at your report, which was a brilliant report, I repeat, the next report I think needs to address those issues of potential disaster recovery plans for each of the states. They must have some kind of a document that states very clearly how they intend to react to certain disasters. And they can rank those disasters. You know, you can have those disasters that are just like you do with a bond. You have an A disaster, a B plus disaster, a B minus disaster, and all that kind of, and how prepared is that state? So you have a disaster preparation index. So beyond the fiscal index you had, you also have an index that looks at how prepared are these states to manage economic disruptions. So under a COVID-19 period, I think those will be key things that we need to take a look at, right? Okay, I want to rush through this because it is fast spent. Right, now, what were our key findings from Budgit's report? Now, I've mentioned one before, that debt has risen. We've all known that. That's a known fact, and we can get past that. But there's another problem with the states based on Budgit's report, high state overhead costs. His Excellency referred to that of Lagos State and said he wasn't too happy with the proportion now, but it wasn't as bad as other states. So that's good. But the truth of the matter also is that strategic economic consequences, yes, it does. And those economic consequences can be dire. But how badly they will impact the local economy will depend on how each state decides to bring up programs. Is there something you can do to migrate a certain proportion of that civil service out of the civil service into the private sector over a period of time? Not everybody will move at once. But there should be frameworks that migrate people from the public sector to private enterprises. So that's one of the things we noticed in your report. You mentioned that states with high overhead costs include Ekiti, Kogi, Kano, Plateau, Kwara, Nasarawa, Taraba, Adamawa, and Benue. For some reason, they seem to be concentrated in the north central and basically north central states. That's troubling, because north central states is also supposed to be the country's food basket. Okay, so one would have expected that they wouldn't have had such a high amount of overhead costs, because a lot of them will actually be in agro and agro-allied activities. But they're not in agro and agro-allied activities. So where are they? In the public service, doing what? Those are conversations we need to have with ourselves. We need to improve security in the country. That's where I'm going, actually. A lot of people are not on the farms because there's not sufficient security for them to be there. But then again, I have a big question. Must everybody be on the farm? America has only 3% of its population in the agricultural sector, and it's feeding America and perhaps a large proportion of the world. So is it about people or about technology and processes? So we have to come to that conversation with ourselves, that when we're talking about agriculture, what really are we referring to? The number of human beings on a fixed amount of land, or the technology that enables us provide more food per unit of land? The concepts are quite simple. My preference would be for us to see how we can get technology to improve agricultural production, rather than talk about human beings being thrown to land. But there's another issue. Even if human beings are going to be thrown to the land, would we believe that there will be an increase in productivity per individual? The answer actually is no. The more people you put on a fixed piece of land, the worse off you are. Your productivity declines. So we need to address that issue of the agricultural sector squarely. That is not something that is actually part of the report of 2020, but it is one of our own extensions of the consequence. Because if you have a few states in the north central having a high cost of overheads relative to their total revenues, that's really difficult under COVID. Because don't forget, the state governments need to pay these people. Many of these state governments you have mentioned are also FAC dependent. They don't generate significant IGR. So if FAC goes down, what happens to all these people who constitute the bulk of this recurrent expenditure? So I think that those are issues that we can have, conversations we can have later. Then, yes, one of my favorites, your fiscal sustainability index, which I must say, I must commend you, is a very, very, very innovative and good index to have. It was very interesting and insightful. You noticed that in the fiscal sustainability index, 5 states seem to have shown great resilience and strength in their fiscal sustainability. The first state you mentioned was Rivers State. You mentioned Anambra State, Ogun State, Lagos, and Kano. These are the expected culprits, the old culprits. Rivers State, because of course there's a large oil and gas segment. Anambra State, a very vibrant manufacturing and industrial segment. Ogun State, manufacturing. Lagos State, commerce. Kano, commercial, is also large commercial, grains in particular. So yeah, we would have expected fiscal sustainability to be very strong in these states anyway. But how do we move the other states that don't have such robust fiscal sustainability to higher levels of fiscal sustainability? So I think budget also needs to go beyond just the data and engage states and provide them with options, outlooks, possibilities. Let them reimagine their circumstances, and so they can move up. Because islands of prosperity is not what Nigeria needs at this moment. We need prosperity that is glacial, that goes across the various states. So it is important that this report gets to the various other states, and recommendations are made as regards to how they can tweak their economies. Like I said before, it's about rethinking, it's about reimagining, and it's about re-strategizing. Those are 3 key R's that we in ProShare believe are very important when we're looking at subnationals. And then perhaps on the last note in respect of these subnationals, we've talked about it. You said 5 states with highest foreign debt burden: Lagos, Kaduna, Edo, Cross River, Bauchi. We've talked about it. All these states need to revise the level of leverage they have in dollar terms. And perhaps they also need to see, are there creative ways in which we can manage ourselves with less debt? Then I think I want to quickly go on to an issue that relates to reimagining, because the governor himself mentioned, Lagos State Governor mentioned that, reimagining. Let us all reimagine Lagos. What is the most salient characteristic of Lagos that you keep hearing about? It's a state of aquatic splendor. Okay? All these things are quite good. But one of the questions I've asked myself, and we've asked in ProShare, basically is that, where is Lagos' marine economy? Because if you're a land of aquatic splendor, we want to see that marine economy thrive. Why is Lagos not a 24-hour economy? Why is it that I can't wake up at 2 a.m. and say I want to watch a movie? I have insomnia. I can't sleep. And I don't want to stay at home, and I'm unsettled. And I say, let me go and watch a good movie. Why? We should be able to have a Lagos that does a 24-hour business. Which, no, the truth of the matter is that Lagos is yet to optimize the opportunities that exist within its borders, right? Lagos, like I said before, is a commercial and service economy. So what I expect to see is that you have shopping malls that are 24 hours. I expect to see a situation where you have a Lagos where I can go to a fish market at 3 a.m. I say I want to give myself a treat. 3 a.m. I go to the fish market, and I have a fish market that's actually available, and I can buy fish and I can cook, and I see a lot of people smiling and saying, "Hey, this." But it is possible. It's about how you imagine your state. It's about how you imagine your reality. If you can't imagine it, you can't achieve it. It's as simple as that. You've got to be able to imagine before you achieve. Because when you imagine, the next thing is, how do I get there? And then the whole policy frameworks that are required now kick in. But you first of all have to imagine that future. Okay, so I think states like, I'm just using Lagos as a placeholder, as an example of what states can achieve if they decide to imagine, if they decide to rethink, if they decide to re-strategize. Lagos is a brilliant, this $1.4 billion debt of Lagos is peanuts in dollars. It's peanuts, quite honestly. We're looking at it relative to where we are. But if we look at that $1.4 billion relative to what we can be, it's really peanuts. Lagos has a massive hospitality potential, the hospitality industry. Yes, COVID-19 has created. Can we rethink hospitality? Can I hold a conference virtually? Can I make Lagos a hub for technology such that I want to teach people maybe something along the lines of financial inclusion? Must they be with me? The new normal suggests that they don't need to be with me. But if Lagos has a hub, incubators, sandboxes that have people, young Nigerians, and we have a lot of them in Lagos, young Nigerians with great ideas, and Lagos State government provides the framework to support those people, then we're getting somewhere. See, the problem with Nigeria is that everybody says, oh, you know what? Tax, 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 yes, tax. How do you tax people in a recession? Their money, they don't have the money anyway. Some people have lost their jobs. Some people have gone on half salary. Some people, a certain percentage of their salary is gone, and we're going to tax. Our concept of governance is that the government's responsibility is to grow the people. When you grow me, tax me. I'm not saying that Lagos has been high-handed in taxes. That may not necessarily be true. But what I am saying is that Lagos has the ability to grow its economy, and I'm using Lagos as an example, please, just as an example. It can grow its economy, and once it grows that economy by growing its people, then the taxes will rise. It's not rocket science. Taxes will actually rise when you grow the people. Has Lagos put in place a framework that adequately grows those people and grows the critical segments of the Lagos society. 60% of Nigerian population is between the ages of 18 and 35. A lot of that population is in Lagos. In the COVID-19 era, what is Lagos doing to address the issues related to that population? Then another thing I want to talk about quickly here is this. I've heard it said that Nigeria, we pay the lowest tax rates. I mean, our VAT used to be 5%, is now 7.5%. Okay, there's a 50% increase. Is that really true? It's true that nominally, our VAT rates in Nigeria is perhaps the lowest in West Africa. But there are rates that we are not taking into account when we're looking at taxation. Have we looked at non-state participants in the economies of states like Lagos? For those of us who have had to go by Danfo, you hear Owo load, Owo chairman, Owo passenger, or whatever it is they call it. We hear all those things. What are those things? They are taxes. There are taxes. Now, who the beneficiary of the taxes is a different matter entirely. So in the process of, why I'm going there is this. In the process of reimagining Lagos, when we reimagine Lagos, if we can key into the cash flow that comes from Owo load, can we use it as a platform to develop other areas of the state economy? I've been involved in the state transport business for well, let me say in a while ago, a couple of let's say years ago, and I know the kind of money that flows through that system. It's not small. Let me just put it that way. It's not small. Don't let me say the average, but it's not small. It's a big amount of money, and therefore, what I'm saying is that in reimagining the states, if we create opportunities where Owo load is moved away, if not fully, partially, from non-state actors and make the state increasingly more sustainable. And what I'm saying in Lagos is also true of other states. Let me give you an example. We have a state like Osun State, which is basically also it's actually basically a civil service state. Agricultural activities take place, but they're not optimized. So it's mainly full of civil servants. But is that the greatest opportunity that Osun has? No. One of Osun State's greatest opportunities is actually culture. It's culture. I hear people, I'll give you an instance quickly. Many of us are wearing very nice clothes. Some of us are wearing African type clothes. And we say we are wearing native. You're not wearing any native clothes. Most of those clothes are actually manufactured where? In Asia. I won't mention the country. We all know the country. But they're manufactured in Asia. So what is native about what we are wearing? What is native about it is design. The idea design is native to us, is indigenous to us. The Ankara design is indigenous to us. So in design, we can upgrade ourselves and uplift ourselves. If that's what we want to do, I say, you know what, okay, let's leave the cloth making to the other guys. But in design, let me shock you. One very prominent American young lady, brilliant woman, whose sister is married to a rapper. I haven't mentioned any names, but the sister is married to a rapper. Actually, adherent materials, unique adherent materials. She said, yes, mommy, no problem. Then she's happy with the money, right? She's happy. And meanwhile, we patent those designs and make an international brand out of it. The Ghanaian kente, all of us know it. And when you see it, you know, oh, this is Ghana. But somebody holds the design rights. Somebody holds the patents. So which goes back to the issues of what are we doing with our patent laws and all the other things that also serve as anchors to the various economies of these states. Then going back to my favorite people in Osun, it's my second home. What is happening to bitumen? ProShare recently did a report on asphalt and concrete. And we looked at the opportunities that exist in bitumen and the opportunities that exist in concrete. How come we have limestone being mined across the country, but we don't have any serious mining of bitumen. In fact, Nigeria imports bitumen. But we have bitumen from Osun down to Ondo to Ogun. No, it's actually from Ondo to Osun to Ogun, and even Lagos. Badagry has a lot of bitumen deposits. But we haven't done anything about it. So that's why I'm saying that the opportunities need to be identified based on this 2020 that will create value. The government's responsibility is to create value through private sector enterprise. All I need to do is to create the framework, ensure that if you want licenses, you get licenses very quickly, very easily. If you want security, you will get security. Because when I said that a 24-hour economy, I know many of us were laughing that, 2 a.m., Lagos, are you well? But we can't secure Lagos. Already, the executive governor of the state has said that 2,000 cameras are being, 2,000 private partnership. And let's see what happens. If you have industrial clusters, certain industrial clusters who want security will be prepared to pay for that additional protection. Because Lagos has a command center, so you can use that to be able to monitor clusters. So I don't have to pay individual security men, because you're taking it as a group. And that group says, okay, Lagos State, we are prepared to pay this for this kind of security architecture. And Lagos makes money, right? The businesses feel secure. More businesses want to come in because of the security that they see, and then you begin to multiply the economy. So tax revenues go up. You have more money to provide more of the same kind of security services that these people are clamoring for. Already we have seen that kind of thing in some estates in Lagos, where some estates have 24 hours light. I don't live there. But some estates have 24 hours light. Why? Because they're prepared to the point I'm making. We can rethink our states. We can reimagine it. And then we can re-strategize those states, right? But at the base of it is for us to, first of all, study Budgit's 2020 report, which has tremendous amount of data that many states will find very useful. I like the area where we are talking about comparisons, state comparisons. Yeah, that's quite good. States do need to be compared, right? But competition should be healthy. In saying that states can compare their performance, no two states are the same. Every state is different. So your comparison should be such that you are comparing apples with apples and not apples and oranges. They're two different fruits. Because I can't compare Lagos with another state, which I won't mention, but they're completely different fruits. But it doesn't mean that those smaller states, in terms of revenue, cannot actually ensure that the life of their people is meaningful. We can all live meaningful lives regardless of the size of our states, right? So on a final note, right here, I would like to thank Budgit for this report. That's first and foremost. I think you've done a brilliant job. It's an intellectual work of art, like I've said earlier. It's one we will continue to study at Procia because we are data-based, so we will definitely continue to study it and point out some areas where we think you can move forward. One of the areas I want to quickly tell you I think you can move forward is the fact that you need to do some sensitivity analysis, okay? You've done brilliantly with the figures that as it is. But what about the figures as they could be? What can Lagos do? How can Lagos be restructured to increase its financial stability and improve its rating or its index, its position on your rating index? Can Lagos have a better current and capital expenditure mix? Can Lagos do some of the things I've said and improve certain things? Now, supposing Lagos state government's revenue drops by 20%, we have a second, God forbid, we have a second round of COVID. And as we have just decided to open the economy, we are seeing figures spike. What will happen to revenues of Lagos? How will it be able to service its debt? What will its debt service ratio be if revenues dropped 20%? Yes, you're looking at the past, but for me and perhaps some of my colleagues, we are also interested in the future. I would want to see the future, but we can ramp it up a bit by doing some forward forecasting and doing some sensitivity analysis that we feel will add value to the whole conversation around the state of states. And as Chisom have rightly pointed out, another thing I want budget movement properly within the how would I say it now, analytical space. I know several local government chairmen that don't even live in their local government. They live in one local government, but they're chairman of another local. How do they know the problem with that local government? You don't go through the problem. So for instance, if I'm in Sulere, I'm actually a Sulere boy. If I'm in Sulere and my local government chairman is in Lekki, how does he know what I'm going through? Yes, he can come once in a week, drops by and all that. But can he do better? Yes, he can. Why? Because of budget. Because budget will look at his local government finances and will speak to the figures and say he's sub-performing, that this other local government in this place is doing this and this and this and this. That provides what we call a nudge. Okay? That provides a nudge. And on a final note, final now, I think we've got to integrate technology. We have to integrate technology into our governance processes. Why I'm saying that is basically that there are a lot of opportunities for young people in the area of technology, and these young people can provide amazing amount of innovation for state governments. One of the things that report be stepped up a notch to do other things. Can I come to your site, for instance, and tweak some of the figures for my state, whichever state it is, and say, okay, fine, God bless you, and I see how it positions me in all other things. And I say, gosh, that keeps people sticky to your site. That keeps people interactive with your site. Your site now becomes very interactive because people can go there, engage with your site, and determine whether they're doing well, not doing well, or if they need to do well, by how much they need to grow certain parameters. Okay? That was free consultancy. But ladies and gentlemen, I really want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. Mr. Oyemi regrets not being present. But next time I can assure you that he will be here, and the fireworks that I didn't bring, he will certainly bring it along. So don't get too disappointed.
Pretty good ideas coming up. We'll keep you posted, sir. We know that you will like what we are coming up with. So we're progressing very quickly. Time is not our friend. You know, it's serious business here this morning, and you just wish that you can pause the time and assimilate everything that is coming out. You know, we will soon get to where we'll unveil the report, and doing that for us this morning will be the Honorable Commissioner. But before I bring him up to help unveil the report, I am going to bring up the man who sat on the process of aggregating these reports, you know, who has spent many sleepless nights, you know, he and his team poring over data, mining, making calls, making sure states release, you know, their fiscal, you know, budgets and all that, you know, searching the internet, you know. So I call these guys secret agents, financial secret agents. No matter where you are hiding, the only thing they won't find is when your fiscal data is not online. Even if you hide it on a private server, they will find it. So I'm going to bring up Abel Akeni. He is the research lead at Budgit, you know, the head of research and policy advisory, to briefly. And after Abel is done, we will invite the Honorable Commissioner to help us unveil the 2020 State of States report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Damilola. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to be here to discuss a bit about the figures from the State of States 2020 report. So I will just quickly run through the numbers. Then I will yield to have a fiscal sustainability index in the first place. Nigeria is a very poor country. We have a poor government, but we have a very risk appetite in the way we spend our money and the way we spend government revenue. So it's important for us to look at our realities in terms of how much money is coming in and how that is able to solve our expenditures that we plan for. But over time, do with this report is to actually look at how well the states are doing and what areas that they can improve on. Besides that, one of the reasons why this is very important at a time like this is that there will be COVID-19 induced headwinds that will affect federally collected revenue. And as long as that will happen, and we know that majority of the 36 states are dependent on FAC allocations, this will affect a lot of the states. So it's important to see which states are the most vulnerable to the COVID-19 headwinds and which ones will be able to indexes that the only set of people who can successfully pull citizens in their states out of poverty are actually those who are sustainable and those who have sufficient revenue at their disposal. Nigeria is plagued with high poverty rates, and on the best state in the country, serious problem. But for you to create jobs, for you to fund policies that empower people, you first and foremost need to be sustainable. So that's one of the reasons we do the index. So, but how do we go about our fiscal sustainability index? There are actually 4 factors we look at. If you can bring that up on the screen for us quickly. 4 factors we look at, we call it Index A, B, C, and D, and they are located different weights. First and foremost, how do we estimate how sustainable the state is? To do that, we look at certain expenditure obligations that you cannot basically run away from as a state. As long as you have committed to them, you have to meet them. So we evaluate the state's ability to meet their recurrent expenditure first with their internally generated revenue and their value-added tax, and that's for Index A. But beyond that, we also evaluate their ability to meet these recurrent expenditure obligations with their total revenue, And after that, we look at their debt composition, which is how high is their debt compared to their earning capacity, compared to how well they are making revenue, and that's our Index C. And the weight for that is 10%. And for this year, we have included a new index, which is Index D. And what Index D does is that it evaluates how well states are prioritizing capital expenditures compared to recurrent and compared to overhead. Because in reality, if you are not investing effectively in your capital infrastructure, your ability to generate revenue from your state is a bit limited. For example, if you do not build sufficient or proper roads in your state, you really cannot generate enough money from road taxes. So we evaluate with Index D how well these states are prioritizing CapEx compared to recurrent expenditure. And one of the other things we in the composition of the data used for the analysis is that for recurrent expenditure, we also added, so if you're owing, if states are owing money and there's already a loan repayment schedule, that's something you cannot sort of move ahead. You have to meet those obligations. So that data has been added for our analysis. So using the methodology with our 4 index, we have the top 5 states in the country for 2020, Rivers State, Anambra, Ogun, Lagos, and Kano. And as the previous speakers have said, the underlying factors that have propped some of these states up is their revenue regeneration capacity. And on the other hand, we have the bottom 5 states, Bayelsa, Osun, Ekiti, Plateau, Adamawa states. Now, a lot of these states, one of the biggest problems they had, especially for Bayelsa state, was the high recurrent expenditure burden. Bayelsa is a very small state, but if you look at their overhead cost and their recurrent expenditure profile, it's comparatively large. So when we did the analysis, that weighed them down a lot. Ekiti and Osun, beyond their recurrent expenditures, they also had debt issues, and that contributed to their lower ranking. So when you get a hold of the report, you'll see the ranking for the entire 36 states, but this is just the top 5 and then the bottom 5. Another on federally collected revenue. Okay. So for our next slide, if we look at the ability of states to meet the recurrent expenditures with their total revenue, we see this ranking. There are about 15 states who are in good standing, meaning that with their total revenue, they can actually pay salaries, they can meet their loan repayment obligations, service their debt. There are about 15 of those states. Then we have the next set next slide, please. Okay. So we have the next set, about 8 states. These states are doing fairly okay in terms of meeting their recurrent expenditure obligations, meaning that after they've met these obligations, there is still some money left to invest in capital expenditure. And then we have the third category, consisting about 13 states that actually need to be. The reason is that for their loan repayment obligations in 2019, they actually had a deficit. They had very little or nothing left for capital, because what we observed from their financial statement was that there is an aggressive effort to repay off some of the old loans. So if you look at 2018 and 2019, in 2019 alone, they spent about, I think it's about 212 billion on both debt servicing and loan repayment. So that actually contributed. But for 2019, this was the observation. And one of the things we also did, which I did not think of using 2-year averages, is so that we don't evaluate states based on one-off observations, but we are able to exactly bad. Because if you think about it, our health centers, for them to run, you need to pay doctors. For the schools to run, you need to pay teachers. So recurrent expenditure isn't exactly a bad thing. But the nature of the composition of recurrent expenditure in Nigeria is such that certain other items are actually prioritized within recurrent expenditure. So if you look at the 36 states, for example, there were overhead expenditures were actually larger than the amount of money they spent on capital infrastructure projects. So these are the 11 states in that category: Taraba, Ekiti, Nasarawa, then Kogi, Adamawa, Bauchi. They all spend more money on overhead costs than on capital expenditure. In your overhead expenditure than on capex. It means that in the next 4-5 years, your ability to even generate more revenue to sustain yourself is a bit limited. So in terms of composition of expenditure, another observation we made. Okay. So beyond recurrent expenditure, if we evaluate those who are prioritizing recurrent versus capex, we've seen those ones. Okay, next slide. Almost twice as much as it's spending on its recurrent, it's investing it on capital expenditure. And Kaduna is also doing the same, spent about 148 billion on capital expenditure, while 86 billion went to recurrent expenditure. And then similar thing for Akwa Ibom and Boeing, but to a lesser degree. But these are the top 5 states in the country who spent more on capital expenditure than on their recurrent expenditure. Okay. So then if we also evaluate well in capex, let's look at those who in 2019, these were some of the states that improved the most in how they chose to prioritize capital expenditure. Take Kaduna, for example. In 2018, they spent just 62 billion on capital, and then that that increased by 137% to 148 billion in 2019. So these were the states who improved the most in how they prioritize their capital expenditure. And then for states who were in the bottom 10, who did the least or who dropped in their funding for capital expenditure, we see Taraba State. In 2018, they spent 37 billion, but this dropped to about 7 billion in 2019. It was the largest drop of all the 36 states in the country. And then we have Ondo State reducing their capital expenditure from 68 to about 29 billion. So, but these are the bottom 10 who reduced the amount of money they invested in capital infrastructure. But beyond investing in capital infrastructure as a line item, or beyond us seeing it in your reports that there's this investment, there's this large increase in capital expenditure. Another conversation that needs to happen going forward is, what is the quality of capital expenditure your state is embarking on? Because during our analysis, we saw some of the states who had huge capital expenditure. So take Akwa Ibom, for example. In the previous slide, I mentioned that They had one of the largest capital expenditures in the country, but you would observe that from their financial report, the amount of money they spent on capital expenditure for the state government house was even more than what was spent on health. So for state government house, you had about 22.6 billion spent on the state government house, then about 8.19 spent for health. So this is not exactly an indictment or saying something else is going in the state government house. There might be certain other there might be some expenditures which they are incurring under that line than on health and education. Similar thing was observed in Rivers State. Then another observation we made was that there were some states, take Adamawa for example, that had a line item called reforms and governance. So the amount of money they were spending on reforms and governance was actually larger than what was going to health and what was going to allocation to that. So for overall debt growth, between 2014 and 2019, one of our observations was that there was a approximately 163% increase in the total debt burden of all the states, from about 2 trillion to about 5.39 trillion. But what exactly have these states been investing it in? I think that's an important question that citizens need to ask. And as more states seek to just be used to pay salaries, I should also have some debt ceilings that prevents some states from getting into a debt crisis. And one of the ceilings they have, or one of the limits they have, is that for you to borrow from the capital market in any particular year, your total debt must not be more than actually breached. This will be a struggle if. So in terms of the debt growth, there were about 10 biggest contributors to that huge spike we saw on the screen. About 10 of the states in the country contributed or took about half of the loans, or about 1.668 trillion naira worth of that increase. 10 states contributed to that. Lagos, Rivers, Akwa Ibom, then we have Kogi State and Osun State. Kogi, Edo, Osun, Cross River, Kaduna, and Adamawa. And it's important for me to just mention here that of these 10 states that contributed to the most to the debt spike, 2 of the states, Kogi and Adamawa, actually were also the states in the category of those who were spending more on overhead costs than on capital expenditure, especially for 2019. So if you are one of the states who is taking a huge chunk of the country's debt, but when we look at the books and what is prioritized is really overhead, that's overhead costs, that's a cause for concern, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Okay, so for our next thing we highlighted in our report was exchange rate volatility. So who are the most exposed? One of the dangers of foreign debt is that it exposes a country to risks of volatile exchange rates. So the larger your foreign debt, the more exposed you are. If we notice, the exchange rate as at December was about 305 naira to $1. And as at today, that exchange rate is about 380. So for a state, if we look at the most exposed states, Lagos is the most exposed, if you bring that up on the screen, followed by Kaduna. So Lagos with a debt of about 1.39 billion. As at 2019, their exchange rate, or with the 305 exchange rate, if you calculate their debt burden, if you convert it to Naira, and then you convert it using today's exchange rate, you will see that just by virtue of devaluation of the Naira, the actual debt burden for Lagos State has jumped by nearly 103 billion. And that's not money that is invested in infrastructure. That's not money that is invested in any activity for the state. It's just by virtue of devaluation. And then the debt burden has spiked. And that will be repaid over the lifespan of that debt. So that's a very important risk that more states need to be aware of, so that in these times, there will be less emphasis on maybe taking foreign debt. And His Excellency, the governor, actually mentioned it, that they were going to prioritize taking more domestic than foreign because of these exchange rate volatility risks. Okay. So if we also look at beyond the exposure for states that have high exchange rates or high foreign debt, There's also another problem in the country with the states, and that has to do with their, please can I have the next slide? And that has to do with their dependency on federally collected revenue. Now, we observe that, or everyone is aware that with COVID-19, we have seen a drop in both crude oil prices and the resultant revenue that comes to the federal government. Now, going forward, who will be the most affected by these drops in crude oil prices and by these drops in the federal government revenue? So on this list, we have the top 15 states, or the worst 15 states in the country, who are most dependent on the federal government to fund their expenditure. And on top of the list, we have Bayelsa. So Bayelsa depends on the federal government for about 89% of its revenue. That's about 90% of what the government gets, or the federal government gets, salary obligations, and then contractual obligations to contractors. So Bayelsa, Borno, Katsina, Kebbi, Taraba, these are some of the most dependent states on the federal government. Then in terms of those who are least dependent, the best in the country was actually Lagos State. Then I think Rivers State was next. Those ones are least dependent. They could fund most of their obligations from their own internally generated revenue. And I think that's something that a lot of states need to emulate and need to work towards. So for internally generated revenue, in terms of improvement, the top 5 states in the country were Rivers, Lagos, Kaduna, and Enugu. But we observed that there were some reductions. For example, Ogun State, their total internally generated revenue reduced by about 13 billion. Kano State reduced by 3.5 billion, and then Gombe State also saw some reductions in its internally generated revenue. So these are some things that those states will need to maybe double up their efforts in that area to strengthen their IGR, because with the current fiscal realities, there will be little money coming, or little increases in the money coming from the federal government. So most of them will have to rely on internally generated revenue. So before I wrap up briefly, I should just mention that one of the things we did with this report was also to look at a sub-theme. It's something we do every year. And for this year, we looked at how well states are financing their health and their preparedness for disease outbreaks in general. And the analysis excludes COVID-19 because COVID-19, it's like, it's top in everybody's mind. But what happens is that there are a whole lot of other diseases that now take the back seat as a result of COVID-19. In 2019, the total disease outbreak in the country, from cholera, from measles, and diseases that have very serious fatality rates, the total disease outbreaks was about 94,000. So we see a state like Ebonyi in the south having about 17,600 plus cases of both cerebrospinal meningitis, measles, and several other diseases. So we see Osun State having 17,000 cases, Borno State having about 15,000 cases of disease outbreaks. So how well are states preparing to combat these types of outbreaks when they happen in their states? And to do that, we came up with a scoring matrix. We came up with a scoring matrix that evaluates 6 questions. So the first question we asked is, what's the degree of funding going to the health sector in that particular state? And if the state is less than 5% on health, they score a certain amount, and if they are spending above 15%, they also score a certain amount. They score the highest point for that category. Another question we asked was how well they are funding WASH activities, which is water, sanitation, and hygiene. A well-funded health sector, but you have maybe poor water and sanitation conditions in your state, you will experience difficulties in controlling certain outbreaks. You see the advisory that goes around for COVID-19, wash your hands, use hand sanitizers, but there are states who have water problems. So how would they be able to protect themselves in those situations? So one of the questions we asked was, how well is the government funding water and sanitation issues? And beyond that, we looked at, to what degree is the government planning to help citizens reduce the out-of-pocket expenditures at the point of treatment for citizens? Now, one of the things that discourages some citizens, especially in very poor regions, from going to seek medical treatment is sometimes they don't even have the money when they get to the hospital for treatments. So that alone, if more people are not going to the hospitals for treatments, it means you're going to have a huge number of people. Maybe if there's a disease outbreak, you might have a huge number of people who are going untreated, and that increases the risk factor for spread of diseases. Other things we considered are the outcomes from these financing activities. Now, I've talked about, how well are you funding health? How well are you funding WASH? But what is the outcome? So yes, you funded your health sector with X naira in the last 5-10 years. But when there was a disease outbreak in your state, were you able to were those systems you funded able to control that particular outbreak? So in this regard, states who had less than 100 cases for diseases, excluding COVID-19, will actually score higher than those states who had above 1,000 cases of disease outbreaks and their health systems could not control it effectively, will score a bit lower. Again, we looked at open defecation. We have about 47 million people in a particular state, because if you have a large number of people doing open defecation in a state, there is a higher rule for communicable diseases. So states with higher amounts of people doing open defecation will see their performance drop a bit. A similar analysis was done for water, the water situation in the state, and then we had our final ranking, or our final output from the scoring matrix, which actually showed that the maximum score was 6, and for nearly all the 36 states, you rarely found a state that scored as much as 5, indicating that they were relatively well prepared to combat certain disease outbreaks. So it's something that states need to, going forward in 2020 and beyond, increase focus on, how they fund WASH activities and how they fund the health sector, but not just how they fund these things, but how these outcomes, or all these funding activities translate to improved outcomes. So at this junction, I will end my presentation here, then yield the floor to the hosts for the next session, which is the lunch and the panel session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abel. If you give Abel the time, he will keep us here till tomorrow morning. So very quickly, we'll go to the unveiling of the report, and I want to the podium the Honorable Commissioner of Planning for Lagos State, and I also want to bring up also our special guest to join him. Let me start from Mr. Gabriel Okewu, CEO of Budgit. I want to bring up Mrs. Toyosi Akerele. She's been here since morning. Thank you for waiting. We'll soon go to your panel session. I want to bring up Mr. Teslim Shitabe. I also want to bring up Mr. Femi Taiwo and Mr. Kola Oluwadare. Please join us very quickly to unveil the report. I am going to hand over the mic to the Honorable Commissioner. Thank you, sir.
I'm quite delighted to be here today to join other distinguished guests to unveil this report. I've always believed that leadership comes in different ways. Even though everybody thinks leadership must come out of political leadership, I believe also that leadership comes from active participation of the citizens. I also feel there's the leadership that is delivered through enterprise, because certain acculturations for people come as a result of the firms and the companies they work for that has even defined their basic work ethics, right? And another way you provide leadership is transparency and accountability. And that is a place where Budgit has situated a lot of its activities. Right? I've always believed that the most successful form of governance is that government that is able to slip itself into a space where it comes under scrutiny to the people. That's what Lagos State stands for. We have a state that is full of cerebral minds, right? And it doesn't matter how powerful you think you are as a governor, right? You must understand that the people will speak. Base of our 6 pillars is citizens' participation and engagement. In a few weeks' time, we will be hosting the Lagos Economic Summit, which we call a Higbeti. And that is not just a talk shop. It's a talk shop where we account at the next Higbeti that has just happened. So I'm glad to be part of this. I must thank you also, ProShare, for your comments. And what we do in Lagos State is basically submit ourselves to such scrutiny. It cannot be for the worse. It can only be for the better. And if you have enough sense, then you should be able to change the direction of the data that comes out. And evidence-based leadership is going to begin to come to the fore more strongly in our country, where there will be one single source of truth. So I would like to unveil this very important report. I would like to encourage everyone that plays any part in data to join information on the table to cause a change course of that government. And I think that is all we are looking for. So I would like to unveil this report. And I believe that to the glory of God and to the benefit of mankind, especially our country and the various states of this federation, the time is beginning to expire. Today, you do in your state, your FAC revenue remains the same even if you drove everybody out. So you can actually improve your per capita by driving people out of your state. Right, so we are also going to steer the ship to the point where your performance counts in the amount of revenue that you do get. Thank you, Budgit, for all of this body of work, and everyone also who will take from here and expand it in providing insights as to how people.
We know that some of us are already looking forward to maybe meeting our next appointment. We will try as much as possible to make it brief. We'll be going to the panel session right away. But shortly before that, I will be sacked if I don't recognize this very important personality. He's been with us since the beginning, and I've just been missing him. But I am smarter. The originator, the co-originator of Bonio, also the second person, the co-founder and director of Budgit. I'm sure that's the name that all of us in this room know. That's the name we've interacted with. Maybe I've saved the best for the last, as they say. So I'm recognizing you. I know you are hearing me. So thank you very much for your leadership. Thank you very much for steering the ship of Budgit. I know that with you we will do greater things. A round of applause for Mr. Shewa and Mr. Joseph Akunbiade, please. So I'm going to call up. I also have a guest in the house. This one is my personal guest. I asked my associate to reach out to him, and said, because he's a supporter of Budgit Online, and he also interacts with the house, the person of Mr. Yinka Ogunubi. You're very welcome, sir. I actually reached out to him, and he's here, and we're so surprised. I said, I'm going to recognize your presence. Thank you very much. I also recognize that you do a thread of state of states. You are someone very interested in fiscal issues of states, and you do that on your Twitter handle, and also engage with institutional authorities and governments. Thank you very much for the work you do. You're very welcome. I'm going to right away call on the panelists. So, and I'm going to start from, I'm going to call on the first person, our Honorable Commissioner for Budget and Planning, Lagos State, Mr. Samuel Egube. You're welcome, sir. A round of applause for him, please. I'm also going to call on the chairperson of the Victim Support Fund of COVID-19 Task Force, the person of Mrs. Toyosi Akerile Ogunshiji. She's been here since morning. You're welcome, please. And we also have two of our panel members online. The person of Mr. David Okwele Ugunta. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that appropriately. Is the Honorable Commissioner for Budget and Planning, Enugu State. Please, is he online? I'm sure the technical people will call. Yes, he's online. You're very welcome, sir. And finally, we have Ms. Buhari. She's now the Chief Executive of Sana Lima Foundation in Kano State. You're very welcome, ma. We can't hear her. Please, technical, can you please work on the sound? Can I have another mic here, please? Us, about the way forward for Lagos in terms of revenue generation, since the idea of foreign debt is no longer, a viable option.
Okay. I think the issue of improved revenue, it's foreign debt volatile. Lagos State has significant amount of potential to raise its revenue. And there are two major things we would need to do. One is, again, to look at data. One of the things I said, maybe budget could help us, but we're also doing, is to interrogate what I will call the commanding heights of the economy of Lagos, and to see how that economy is organized in a way by which you can then harvest your revenues more easily. So if you see, for example, the real estate sector, it's a big space, right? In terms of the amount of transactions and the value of those transactions happening, and also in the transaction processing. And what we're doing is we're significantly digitizing the land titling process. Mr. Governor has also decentralized the approvals. So it's not just him signing. You have several commissioners who have been authorized to also sign to get things moving. As I'm here right now, some other of my colleagues are at the Oriental, where they're having a roundtable on real estate. And the idea is that we must be able to bring transparency into that place and order, and then you see how the income flows. The other space is in our markets, right? Lagos is one big market, and quite frankly, it's not completely properly dimensioned for revenue, right? And if it is that big, you then ask yourself, how much do we harvest out of our markets in revenues? The other space is our transport system and our services system in terms of entertainment and all of that. Quite thankfully, we just got a Supreme Court judgment in terms of our ability to fiscalize consumption in that particular system, and then deploy technology in the transportation system so you can also see the throughput. Now, once you see the throughput, people say, okay, the unions get a lot of the taxes, right? We do not deploy the mechanisms that the unions do deploy, but we believe that there's a lot of value in looking and partnering with them to harvest some of those opportunities in that area. So all of these are going on. We're deploying our last mile initiatives, which will be purely driven by technology in a bus system from the last mile, and then we shall expand that in. We are working on our markets, policies on market to bring about organization into our market spaces, and therefore we can see where goods are coming, the value of these goods, and where they are going. And with that transparency, you can then begin to have partnerships or conversations around harvesting the revenue potentials that can come from there.
Thank you very much. So my second question will be to Mr. David. Is Mr. David online, please? So basically, we're talking about revenue. Enugu State is, is actually the leading state in the southeastern region in terms of revenue generation. I think they did about 31 billion last year in terms of revenue. But you still see that it still has over 60% reliance on federal allocation, from the federal government. What is the state? What is the state doing to, to increase, to generate revenue and, depend less on the federal government?
Okay, thank you, Budgit. It's a pleasure being here and being part of this event. My thanks. I can also say hi to my friend and my colleague, Mr. Sam Egube, who is seated there. I would have been part of you guys there, but one or two things kept me from coming. Having said that, what Budgit is doing is quite impressive, because for me, the end point is, creating a platform for peer learning, for states to see, okay, this is where we are not doing very well. This is where another state is doing very well. So we can go to this state and see how they are doing. And there is quite something good, because I remember before the beginning of the lockdown, I was in Lagos, I was in Kaduna, to see how the Ministry of Economic Planning and Budget is running things there, so that we can get some of these things and then come back here and domesticate that. So it's really a good thing that Budgit is doing, and I really want to use this opportunity to encourage them. Now, coming to your question, Enugu State is doing well in terms of IGR, and it's not as if we are doing, maybe other states are not doing it. Now, two things that has led Enugu State to be where they are in terms of revenue generation today is, one, political will. Invested so much in infrastructure in the state's internal revenue service, and this infrastructure, basically automated the entire state internal revenue service. That today in Enugu State, everything in terms of revenue generation is automated, from assessment to payment, even to accounting reporting. Today we have what we call e-tax clearance. Today in Enugu State, we have a situation where you come to pay for one or two things of revenue in in certain places, and you are asked to pay with your ATM card. In the ministry or department or agency, you now have you now have POS there, and then you pull out your debit card, and then you slot it, and whatever amount you intend to pay will be deducted directly, via POS transaction. So what we have done is massive deploy of IT in terms of revenue generation. And then going forward, we are also not relying on our own. Part of what has also helped us has to do with what we call back duty assessment and recovery. Whereby we have to engage some consultants to, look at books of accounts of tax-paying entities and see what they are supposed to remit to government that they have not remitted, and then from there it is assessed, and then they will now get them to pay what they are supposed to pay to the government. So that is that. Then another one is what we call restrainment of offices and this is usually done after getting appropriate court backings. The state internal revenue service now has to move out to tax payment organizations and then have to seal off their branches in Enugu. And this now made them to now get back to their head office and then pressing on each OAS in maintaining a good IGR lead. We are participating in this event because of what IT can now do. So IT is the in thing, and we will not rest our oars in making sure that we now automate other revenue generating MDAs, making sure that everything there is automated from assessment to collection and then reporting. We also continue to train and retrain our staff, and then bringing in the idea of encouragement, to staff, making sure that yes, when you do well and when you have performed well in terms of revenue generation, that you are in one way or the other, you receive a pat on the back from government. So these are some of the few things that the state is doing, and the state intends to sustain to make sure that yes, we'll continue to be on a sound footing in terms of IGR. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David. A quick follow-up question to that, sir. Yes, we can see that the revenue of Enugu State, the internally generated revenue actually of Enugu State is increasing, but we still realize, or we still notice in our report that a large percentage of that still goes to recurrent expenditure. What is the state doing to balance this up? Of course, the purpose of generating revenue is to, allocate a large portion of that to capital expenditure, to critical sectors, education, health. Is there any strategy to balance that up to ensure that the capital expenditure component of the budget grows, increases, while probably keeping the recurrent expenditure, constant or probably?
For me, there are two angles to capital investment. One, you need to make the capital investment where capital now flies, from the coffers of government. Maybe you build hospital, own recurrent elements, the operating cost of maintaining such hospital or maintaining or keeping the school running. So you now find out that aside from making the capital investment, after a point, you now see that most of the expenditure you will incur will now have to be on the recurrent expenditure. Now, what you are talking about is about the holistic capital expenditure of the state. But when you look at the sectors, in terms of sectoral expenditure for the state, you will now find out like a sector such as works and infrastructure, is hitting about 97-99% performance. And the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure is where the key investment in that is where you make the key capital investment in the state. Because when you talk about building of road, when you talk about construction of hospitals, construction of office buildings, the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure, which handles all construction in the state, is hitting 95, 96, 97 performance. And then you now see like health, because it's service-oriented. You now see education because it's service-oriented. Now, gulping more of our recurrent expenses. But we are talking about 2019. Now, this is 2020, and COVID-19, has come, and it has helped everybody to see that we need to reset, our thinking and see how we do things. And in this year, because of the advent of COVID-19, every state has to revise their budget downwards and bring in pandemic. But now we resuscitate the state from the consequences of the pandemic. So this year now we are making huge investment in health and infrastructure. As we speak, the state is constructing what we call type 3 model type 3 healthcare centers, primary healthcare centers across the state. The state is also building general hospitals. And then there's this famous hospital in Enugu that named it Enugu State Infectious Disease Hospital. And massive infrastructural development is going in there. So for 2020, we are now making, we are going to see by the time you do this report, maybe by 2021, you will see that, yes, a lot of investment in this year has gone into health, has gone into education, because COVID-19 has now helped us to see, okay, we are talking about physical distancing. So if you are going to reopen schools, you need to have more spaces so that students and pupils can be, physically distanced from one another. And for you to do that, you now have to build or construct more classroom blocks and all that. So this year, the COVID-19 and then the revise in the budget have also helped, the state to now look critically inwards and say, how do we make improvements in these areas, not just health and education, but in SME and also in ICT. Today, the state is talking about building of ICT hubs in 2 centers in the state. The state is also looking at agriculture and making massive investment in agriculture and all this. So going forward, the state is not has looked at what has happened. But like I earlier said, you make investments in health and education, that is capital investment, but then you need to now sustain it. And sustainability is also key, because when you make these investments and you don't sustain them by making sure that they are run properly, I mean, it will now turn to what you may call wasteful investment, because it is not giving, you are not, getting the benefits you are supposed to reap by making such.
So we're exploring, arrange my questions very well. We're exploring fiscal dimensions of epidemic preparedness of states. And I want to direct this question to you, Mrs. Toyosi. You are the chairperson of the COVID-19. So I want to direct this question to you, Mrs. Toyosi. You are the chairperson of the COVID-19 Task Force Victim Support Fund. And I follow you also on Twitter. I see you document most of your travels. You go north, south about this COVID-19 and stuff. And I see a lot of you communicate your heart and all that. I'm going to ask you, what has your experience been, especially regarding the financing aspects of COVID-19? What can we do better? A lot of donations, the federal government obviously didn't have enough money to, citizens were able to, had a concerted effort to attack something that we know is an existential threat to every one of us. We saw a collaboration between public and private sector. But I want you to briefly share with us your experience. Are we prepared for this? Especially from the fiscal point of view?
Thank you very much. I have a unique perspective this afternoon because I don't work on the side of the government. And I think that this conversation can't be complete without speaking to the role of the private sector in powering, these conversations. A quick background about the Victim Support Fund. The reason why I want to do that is because in Nigeria we hear so much about when money is released, but we rarely hear about what the money is used for and where it went to. And that's the important thing that I want to be able to speak to this afternoon. In June 2014, President Jonathan, at the time, had set up the Presidential Committee on the Victims of Terrorism Support Fund as a private sector-led humanitarian initiative to be able to provide so-called psychosocial support, rehabilitation, and resettlement for victims of terrorism and insurgency across the northeast region of Nigeria. As you know, Boko Haram has taken over a portion of those territories of the north in Nigeria, and you have a lot of ungoverned territories at the moment in that region. A year later, because we started getting, to avoid the interference of politics, Because whether you like it or not, governance is a derivative of politics. The Presidential Committee on the VSF became registered as the Nigerian Foundation on the Victims of Terrorism Support Fund, and President Jonathan appointed the chairman, General T.Y. Danjuma, and vice chairman at that time, Mr. Fola Adiola, one of the co-founders of GT Bank. I happen to have been appointed alongside both of them as a member of that organization. Now, in March this year, on the 30th of March precisely, General Danjuma, the chairman of the VSF, decided to, as a rapid response strategy of the Victim Support Fund, which is perhaps the first private sector-led humanitarian initiative in the Northeast and the most prominent and visible in the North and all of that, to set up our COVID-19 task force as a rapid response component of the VSF to immediately begin to provide support for internally displaced persons, poor and the vulnerable people of the Northeast. Now, all of the conversations we've had this afternoon have focused a lot on, we've spoken a lot about Lagos this afternoon. There's also some attention in a couple of states, and I was looking at when Abel was presenting, the narrative around the State of States 2020. It may interest you to know that we never saw the report you published, but 6 of those states are actually 6 of the states that the Victim Support Fund has gone to the interventions between March and so we've gone to Abuja, and we've gone to Ogun State, and I think we've gone to, we didn't go to Rivers. And the preliminary budget for the Victim Support Fund intervention was 1 billion naira. And you made a good point when you said, if you actually go to, everything I'm going to say today is actually on my social media pages and is on the Victim Support Fund social media pages. The reason why we do that is because I personally understand as chairperson of the task force that there's a direct linkage between the management and the mismanagement of resources and the institutionalization of corruption and poverty across different countries of the world. And so citizens shouldn't have to demand information about money that is spent. People who are in positions of authority should responsibly, willingly volunteer, provide that information. Why is that important? Of our 1 billion naira budget in the phase 1, which targeted 7 different locations, and for our second phase, we targeted the southwest, the southeast, and the south-south. The second phase budget was 832,718,480 naira. And I can give you that granular data because we're tracking everything that we spend money on. In the phase 1, we specifically focused on Borno State, Adamawa State, Yobe State, Taraba State, Abuja, Lagos, and Ogun. Abuja, Lagos, and Ogun because those were the frontline COVID-19 locations at the time, and those were the 3 locations where the federal government had declared a lockdown. And it was difficult for the states to implement a lockdown. If people were at home hungry, they will go out into the streets, and there's no way you're going to be able to curb the pandemic. We were at the very peak of it between March and April. And then we had to go to the Northeast states because those were the major locations where people are very poor. Extremely poor, not just poor, they live in the most deplorable conditions. They're stuck in IDP camps, and the economy is bad enough for you and I. You talked about people earning half their salary, some people losing their jobs. And some of the stark realities that we don't speak to here is the fact that there's another population of Nigeria that are, the forgotten backwaters of this country. We talk about social distancing so much. And I walked into Malkoyi IDP camp in Adamawa State where there's over 2,000. If you go on my Instagram page, you'd see it. That community is where T.O.S. Benson did his primary school, took his primary school living certificate. No roads, no bike, no car, no bicycle, nothing. It means that if your child falls ill overnight, that's death. Immediately. Now, so we went on the 14th of April, we went to Abuja, we handed over food, and then to break it down, of that 1 billion naira budget, we spent 20% on Abuja, 20% on Lagos, 20% on Borno State, and then we gave 10% to Yobe, 10 to Adamawa, 10 to Ogun State, and 10 to Taraba. And we broke it down into food, personal protective equipment, and medical items. So for food, we gave out beans in 10 kg, rice in 10 kg, gari in 10 kg, salt in 2 kg, and vegetable oil in 4 liters. And then for medicine, we broke it down to primary healthcare and secondary healthcare. And for primary healthcare, we gave out basic multivitamins, paracetamol, analgesics. For secondary healthcare, we gave out anti-malarial, anti-hypertension, anti-diabetes, because you also know that coronavirus kills older people more than it does to younger people. So you want to be able to reduce the mortality rate amongst the aging population. Now, the reason why this information is important is because the money of the Victim Support Fund was money raised 5 years ago by the private sector. 65 billion naira pledged, just about 40 to 50% of it redeemed. So it's private sector money. And the way those monies are used is important for the private sector to know, because state officials can't steal money without the active connivance of the private sector. Now, for the different states we went, you asked me what has been the experience. You walk into an IDP camp, and there are no wash stations, and you talk about washing your hands under clean water for a 20-second period, and some people haven't had their bath for 6 days. You talk about environments where people haven't seen bathroom slippers for 1 year. You're talking about, so what we did was to provide institutional support for the state government. We bought over 250,000 pieces of Dettol soap and donated it to them, and also encouraged them to build boreholes so that IDPs could actually wash their hands. We bought Dettol liquid, we bought Harpic, we bought Jik. We made sure that we procured some of those hygiene and sanitation items to, be able to, wipe public surfaces and all that. Even the procurement system was something that we paid attention to, because the the tenderpreneurship of Nigeria is one of the things that will destroy this country, contracts. So one of the things we did with procurements was to make sure that we targeted private, the direct manufacturers. That's against using middlemen who would add up markups, and then, what we can donate, when we can donate 100 things, we get to donate just about 20, because we've lost a lot of the money to the middlemen. And you know that in the peak of the pandemic, there was huge prices, food was unavailable, rice was almost non-existent, we had to buy. But as the pandemic began to, as things began to subside and the economy began to open, we began to review the prices of the items we were buying to ensure that we could donate 3 times more in one phase than what we donated in the previous phase. That is the sense of responsibility that people who have public funds should be able to have. The other thing that I wanted to also speak about in terms of my experience is the role that data has helped us to play in the Victim Support Fund. You perhaps know that some of the best schools in the northeast of Nigeria were built by the VSF, infrastructure we've donated. I went with a 7-month pregnancy to Michika Madagali local government in 2017 to do the foundation laying for the only primary healthcare center there, to rebuild their secretariat, rebuild their police stations. We've given, fertilizer, pesticides to farmers. We've done women economic empowerment programs. We've done trauma counseling. We've trained teachers. We've partnered with teaching hospitals across the Northeast to provide prenatal and postnatal care for pregnant women, because they're stories that you will never see in the media, because there are portions of this country that are described as ungoverned territories. So when you cross from Maiduguri all the way to Jete to Dalori to Bama to Goza, things that you only see on the satellite reporting of CNN. Once you cross from Maiduguri, there's no network in all those places. So even if you got killed on that road, in fact, all the trees that are on that road have no leaves on them anymore, because those trees are what the Boko Haram terrorists, climb to shoot down helicopters of, people who are going to do interventions in those locations. Now, when we talk about the preparedness, for me, the greatest lesson from COVID-19 is the ugly underbelly of Nigeria. Our lack of preparedness and the poor infrastructure that we did not have, where we had to start using tents as temporary measures to be able to, provide centers for people to test. We're supposed to be the second largest economy in Africa, and we don't even have hospitals that can rapidly respond to epidemics. I believe that COVID-19 gives us a chance to reimagine a better future. And I think that Nigeria can rethink its transformation process, because this pandemic has shown us now that many of the things you spend money on now, we can cut down on those extra codes of public officials, because you can now do your meetings online. And there's a lot of cost-cutting measures that should be going on because of, the experiences and the stark realities that COVID-19 has presented to us. In addition to that, you also think about the role that data has played for us as the Victim Support Fund. Because with the private, I think apart from CACOVID, where the only private sector, we actually even came out before CACOVID. And we've done a lot of work around probity, transparency, and accountability using a lot of data. Because, again, we have an antecedent of having worked in those regions, even for Lagos, Ogun, and Abuja, and Lagos, Ogun, and Abuja, where we hadn't done much interventions in the past, we worked with local NGOs, civil society partners. In fact, for states where we partnered with NGOs, civil society, traditional organizations, we had 5 times more impact than the states where we simply handed over all of our donations to the state government. We understand that there are certain bureaucratic bottlenecks that government does have. So, for example, if you buy food today and put it in a warehouse for 2 months, the beans is already growing weevils and people are hungry on the streets. But government has a clear template that they're going to use to distribute their own food items. So what we did was to develop a terms of reference for the governments that we're going to make donations to and write them letters. For Lagos State, for example, your Commissioner of Agriculture, Mr. Gbola Onlawal, who is now the Oniru of Iru, was the one who received the food items from us. In Abuja, it was received by the Minister of FCT herself. In other parts, in those specific locations where the NGOs worked, we had 5 times more impact. We also made sure that every category, irrespective of your socioeconomic status, we had dwarfs benefit from our, palliatives. We had pregnant women, we had market women. In Lagos, we worked with Lagos Food Bank, Mama Money. We worked with about 10 different NGOs like that. And I feel that when you talk about fiscal preparedness, if I had one thing to say to the government, it is that transparency would give them more opportunity to attract investment into their states. Because when citizens, in fact, one of the things that I think that we did well in the VSF was every time we were handing over anything to any state government, we were engaging citizens on the side through our local NGO partners. So that when we give you a 150 million naira worth of food and medicals, you don't go and hide it in a warehouse and share it to your political cronies. The citizens are watching on TV and listening on radio that VSF just came and gave you 194 million worth of food. So they can demand a level of mandatory accountability from you. Finally,
Okay.
the thing that worries me the most about institutionalizing accountability and transparency in Nigeria is the citizens, you and I. I feel that our body language and our attitude to look at the whole. If you were having I know that it's social distancing, but if you go to Budgit's page and see the number of people that retweeted this event, there'll be less than 500. And you have BB Niger trending every day. The things that you complain about your government not doing the right thing. You complain that you are being ripped off by private companies. What do you do as a citizen to be present enough to be able to make sure that your governments are responsible? You can talk about fiscal transparency till tomorrow, but if you have economically docile citizens who don't know anything about cost-to-income ratio, the government will continue to steal. And these reports will be nice documents that are covered in dust on the shelf. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're pressed for time, and I want us to, sort of speed it up. I'm going to direct the question to the Honorable Commissioner. Miss Amina Ado is also waiting online. My next question is coming to you, ma'am. So just please, I want to talk to you, sir, about the WASH program. Know that is the basis, that's the foundation for prevention of, most of the epidemics, that are prevalent now. And COVID-19, of course, really opened up our consciousness, to the dangers of, epidemics and all that. But there is cerebrospinal meningitis, there's cholera, there's measles, and all these other. In fact, from our report, if you look at our report, you realize that most states battle with at least one of 8 of these different, diseases, and most of them, you see outbreaks because citizens are not able to access either healthcare or even the most basic WASH program, is absent. What is Lagos doing to ensure, the WASH program is across all the nooks and crannies of the state?
Of course, health was one of the major pillars of what we'll call our agenda, what Mr. Governor calls the themes agenda. And there was a reason why we put health. In health, it was health and environment. Health being curative, where we are looking at both the demand and the supply side of health. And then the environment, which looks at which is where washes, our drainage services, the environment generally, and all that, right? So there are a combination of things we are doing in that entire ecosystem. The first is that we had launched Lashma, which has to do with the insurance scheme. What the insurance scheme does is that people are unable to go because they just feel they can't pay for it. So you needed to create a system that I would say mutually subsidizes itself. Because if you look at a place like Lagos, people say we have a lot of money, but when you look at it per capita, it's not a lot of money, right? The second thing is that from our surveys, on our poverty surveys and our household survey, you see that about 72% of Lagos people who live in Lagos are actually very poor, right? That's about 15 million. So a lot of these people can't pay. So, which is why when we came out with a legislation to encourage people to participate in the health insurance scheme, it was not necessarily because everybody of Lagos needed, there is also vulnerable and indigent people, right, within the entire insurance framework that they can at least access that. The second thing which Mr. Governor talked about it, right, in our plan is the primary health care centers. You have challenges on the doctor side, you have challenges on the infrastructure side, right? And quite frankly, if the insurance scheme is working, right, then you can drive standards better because you are making the payments for those people coming in. And the idea is to ensure that we're onboarding the secondary and the tertiary healthcare centers by rehabilitating all 350 primary healthcare centers across the local government and the wards, right, to enable people access it. So that's what we are doing in the broad sense around health. Now, but we've been very also active around drainage, and we are also trying to deal with things. We have an entire agency that also works on our environment in terms of air quality, in terms of open defecation, to try and reduce significantly a lot of that. But there are also issues around identification in terms of our digital ID mechanisms, to at least know where our people are and what they are doing, you understand, so that you are able to direct things to them, you know, which is one of the big challenges also we faced during the pandemic. You just finally find out that, okay, I always knew I had a lot of people, but where are they, right? How do I get to those individuals? And then you see that the database which we had with Lazara is, I mean, even when you exhaust the old, the elderly, and the vulnerable that is registered there, it's like doing nothing. And so you then have to define all other kinds of schemes. And those schemes sometimes are not as precise, right, as if you had the data going. We are also continuing our investment in our water systems. We have a Dinyo 2 that we are building. It's quite expensive. And we have in the bond program, right, to repair the reticulation on Dinyo 1, to take water, right, both to the west and up to the central, right? All that are ongoing, right? And we're also trying to rehabilitate our mini water works around to just ensure water goes. Now, those are big ticket spends, and they are in magnitudes that are many times, right, the state's revenue capability as at today, which brings us back to your initial point as to that, I mean, there's no alternative. We need to push up the revenue capacity of the state, revenue harvesting capacity of the state. We need to encourage people to pay their taxes. We need to encourage them that their taxes is just part of the equity that they have with the state and with the community. But of course, there's also a lot of collaboration that will be happening with all kinds of agencies who have expertise and technical know-how and data around this. Just yesterday, we had meetings with the Populations Commission of the United Nations discussing this agenda as well.
Thank you very much. I want to direct my next question to Ms. Aminado. I know Ms. Aminado is leading a foundation in Kano State, you know, to the current COVID-19 epidemic, and what level of preparedness do you think Kano State is investing in general epidemic preparedness. Mrs. Amina, she online, please. All right. Do you have my question, ma'am? Okay.
Initially, when COVID-19 started, Kano State fumbled, but luckily enough, the federal government intervened, contribution of 5 billion. And also, I know that Alhaji Aliko Dangote and Abdusamad Rabiu, they also contributed. So that helped the state to actually get back on track. And I believe now everything is under control as infections have reduced considerably. Now, there are areas of improvement that Kano State can make now and going forward in order to be ready to deal with any epidemic or pandemic. One area first is communication. So when you have an epidemic or a pandemic, you need to be able to communicate with the residents to let them know what they need to do to reduce the spread. So the state can definitely improve on that. Then the second thing is we have to acknowledge the fact that Kano State is one of the few states that actually can allocate 15% of its budget to health. But what they need to improve on is to make sure that more is allocated to actually capital spending, not just to budget, but you actually need to spend the money so that these infectious disease hospitals across the state can be in a good shape so that if you have any epidemic or pandemic, you can then be ready to deal with it. The second thing that I believe the state can do to improve its preparedness is to start medical degrees in the Kano State University of Technology. Because we have very few doctors in the state as a percentage of the population. So starting that will increase the number of doctors, not just in Kano, but nationally. Then the second thing, which one of the speakers has already touched on, is the issue of sanitation. I believe there is a lot that can be done to improve sanitation in Kano in terms of covering open culverts, gutters, cleaning the state, packing refuse, making available water, clean water to residents. This is low cost, but it's a very important preventive measure. If you look at Japan, for example, it has a high number of old people, but their mortality from COVID is quite low. And it could be because the Japanese are exceptionally a clean society, and people were wearing masks even before COVID. If you have a cold in Japan, or you wear a mask. So epidemics in the future, it needs to be more creative. They perhaps learn from Lagos in the private insurance. The government workers and people who are employed in the formal sector subscribe to the NHIS scheme. But what of the remaining 85% of the population? We should think of deepening private insurance for the private citizens, perhaps by the state contributing a certain percentage of the premium that should be paid. And then finally, and I think this is very important, we have learned a lot of lessons, not just in Kano, but across the Federation in handling COVID-19. This needs to be documented, shared, and a framework developed which can be used to handle future epidemics. Thank you. Thank you.
poverty around, indigent communities of Nigeria. Research is beginning to show that countries that have very healthy work populations are more productive and can generate higher revenue and maximize their resources. But more than that, when we think about Nigeria in the context of our economy and all of the opportunities and potential that Nigeria does have, I think it's important to ensure that we invest in targeted prevention programs so that in the future, when pandemics like this happen, it doesn't catch us unawares. I also wanted to say that, just in closing, I just wanted to emphasize the fact that as we move on forward as a country, one of the things that we want to begin to take more seriously is the importance of our global competitiveness. The quality of our human capital is directly proportional to the quality of Nigeria's global competitiveness. And at the very epicenter of that, human capital quality is the healthcare of the livelihoods of the human capital, of the people, the sort of lives they live in, the standards of living, the cost of living. You asked a very pertinent question, Mr. Shitabe, about why Lagos State is not a 24-hour economy. I'm sure Governor Sanwo-Olu and all of us would like it to be. But what are the security challenges that underscore, that make it difficult, that would impede that process? And you can imagine that Lagos State can generate twice the revenue that it generates if it was a 24-hour economy. So those are the things. So when we talk about security, it's not just going to be, it shouldn't be just about Boko Haram and the terrorism in the north. We need to think about the underlying security impediments that, make it difficult for even states that are already on, recording high growth to be able to, increase their level of growth and create some ripple effect around states that are within those places, so that at the end of the day, the microeconomics of our competitiveness, it depends and, grows based on our clusters and the firms that, prosper around the entire country.
Thank you very much. Mr. David, are you online? Your closing remarks, please. I'm happy you mentioned that there has been increased investment in health. Can we unmute him, please? Okay, maybe.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear.
Budget to continue doing what they are doing, because it offers states the opportunity, to see themselves from the eye of an independent organization, that evaluates them and puts them, let me say, among their peers. It's true that every state has its own peculiarities, but like I said before, there are still so many areas of improvement. So I will encourage states to look at this critically, look at this report critically, and begin to re-strategize and also rethink and see how they can, create an avenue, like I said before, for peer learning. It creates an avenue for peer learning. Of course, let me use this opportunity to thank my friend, Honorable Sam Egube, for the wonderful treat he gave to me when I and my team were, was in Lagos on peer learning. That was what we did, and he was so magnanimous in hosting us, in making our state comfortable. So I will encourage states to, let's go back, look at this report, and then assimilate it and see areas of improvement. And then thanks to Budgit for what they are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. David. Finally, Ms. Aminat, closing remarks, please, very briefly.
Yes, thank you for having me. What I would like to say is that the fiscal space is very challenging. If you look at what the state governments shared, for example, in terms of revenue, in 2013,
seem to think it says Stanet over there. Oh, okay, I think we've lost her. So I want to thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Commissioner, for gracing this occasion. Thank you, Mrs. Toyosi. Your words have been very impactful today, and I'm sure that we have picked one or two points, to reflect on. And I will also urge you on to keep giving, keep doing more for the people. Mr. Toyosi on the private sector, and then Mr. Samuel Egube at the public sector. So please, let's band together, and I hope that by the time we're releasing State of States 2021, which will reflect on the reports and the numbers of 2020, we will see improvement. This year, we saw that Lagos lost the ranking, the highest sustainability
So that would be my recommendation. And thank you, and I say keep on doing the good job, and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samina. So, like I was saying, so we saw that Lagos lost the top, regained that top spot. I want to say thank you very much once again. Please, a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, sir. So, we have come to the end of this important event. I'm going to invite Mr. Joseph Agubiade, the co-founder of Budgit, to give the closing remarks. So please, and I will also join the photograph. Thank you very much, sirs and